you again for the rapid fire.
Good evening and welcome to our 19th meeting of 2022. Let's see, we'll start with our planning board introductions. I'm Denny Swenson, Chair. Rich Beeler.
Rich Beeler, Secretary.
Cheryl Tagayas.
Cheryl Tagayas, member.
Meredith Hall.
Meredith Hall, member.
Kathleen O'Donnell.
Member, Kathleen O'Donnell.
And Tim Terwinski.
Tim Terwinski, Director of Planning and Community Development.
And do we have Allison tonight?
No. Allison's out of town tonight.
Great. Julia Getman?
Julia Getman, clerk.
Thank you. All right. So our next meeting dates are scheduled for January 27th and February 10th. And I have not yet been able to go through the minutes. I did take a look at January 5th, 22. I don't know if I know Cheryl had. I saw one minor tweak, which was in the second paragraph on page 2. Concerns about investors and speculators were addressed. I just wanted to change the word addressed to discussed. Other than that, I am fine with January 5th, 22 as amended by Cheryl. I don't know where other people were at, if they'd had a chance to look at that.
I did. That looked fine. And Cheryl's changes were fine.
Okay. Meredith?
Yes. Same.
You're fine. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So Rich, are you fine with January 5th, 2022?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm sorry I haven't been able.
Sorry, just a quick question.
Yeah.
That was the latest meeting where there was the other minutes that date back to November, the 30th, the 9th of December, and the 16th of December. So
I'm sorry.
Those are still up in the air.
Yeah,
Okay.
I didn't get a chance to look at
That's
those.
fine. That's fine. It just seemed out of sync. So that's fine. As long as we got the 5th done, that's great.
Yeah, we're backlogged. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess I would, Rich, I'd entertain a motion for the January 5, 22 minutes.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from January 5th, 2022. As amended.
Yep. All right. Second.
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Kathleen O'Donnell.
Yes.
Rich Beeler.
Yes.
Cheryl Tagayas.
Yes.
Meredith Hall.
Yes.
Denny Swenson, yes. Okay. All right. Staff update.
I'll try to keep it short and sweet so we can get on to business. We've been very busy as always. One thing to keep on your radar is we have, and it was actually going on, hopefully it's over by now, but the next 3 40B projects that have come in, we have been able to stay the commencement of those hearings while we had 4 other ones going on. But now that 582 Blue Hill Ave has been approved, we've got to open up the gates for the 3 other ones. That's 16 Amore Road, 936 Brush Hill Road, and 728 Randolph Ave. If everything goes according to the plan that I discussed with the ZBA chair this afternoon, those are going to get continued. 936 Brush Hill Road will start on Wednesday, January 26th. 16 Amore Road will start on Wednesday, February 2nd, and 728 Randolph Ave will start on Wednesday, February 9th. What we're trying to do is keep them on Wednesdays. With the first 4, and this is only relevant to me because I'm at every single one of these. We had a kind of Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday schedule, which was got to be a little unwieldy for everybody, public, staff, consultants, applicants. And so those are going to be hopefully consistently on Wednesdays on a kind of 3-week schedule. So we're going to try that out. Hopefully, not that the other hearings have not gone smoothly. I think they've gone as good as they can go. But we've learned a few lessons, and we'll try to figure that out. So to that effect, I know the planning board had offered some comments at the PEL stage. If you if you're interested in kind of doing formal comments for the actual public hearing, whether written or oral comments, I'm thinking that, I mean, there's still plenty of time to get those done. With the schedule that we've tended to follow, it's been sort of, the first hearing is a presentation and kind of, on the project. The next hearing is a presentation from the peer reviewers, and the next hearing is a presentation or comments or questions from town staff, town boards, town committees. So, plenty of time to get those done. But just, keep that in mind on your agenda moving forward if you've got additional comments beyond what you did for the PEL.
Tim, may I
yes,
for a moment?
Absolutely, yeah.
When the peer review reports come in, can you send those to us or alert us that they're there and we can go to the website to get them?
Sure, absolutely.
Thanks.
Yeah, we'll do that. So, and the final thing that I want to talk about is just sort of a preview of coming attractions for a few things that are one of them I hope will go on the next agenda, and one of them I think has to go on the next agenda. You're all familiar with Woodlot Drive, which is the street that goes up to the Milton Woods development. If you remember that special permit and that whole process, that was always envisioned to be a town road. So we are going through the process of accepting Woodlot Drive as a town road. So we had a public hearing at the select board last night for the select board to essentially kind of vote their formal intent to take Woodlot Drive as a town road. The next step in the process is that gets referred to the planning board for the planning board to review and just make sure that the road has been built to the specifications that are laid out in the special permit and the subdivision approval. In conjunction with that, I'm going to solicit comments from, DPW and town engineer are kind of the primary, folks that you're going to want to hear from, just to make sure that, everything that they have, that they've seen leads them to believe that the road is built up to spec and that there's problems or outstanding issues. Once you've heard and discussed, that those comments, you've got to make a report basically to the select board that says, okay, go ahead and accept this. It's been built to the specifications that we laid out in our approval when we approved the project originally. And then there's another public hearing where the select board effectively kind of formally votes to accept the road, and then it goes to town meeting. I'd love for that to be on the agenda for the 27th so that we can kind of maintain progress towards the annual town meeting. The board technically has 45 days after they kind of discuss the road to render their report. My hope is that you will take less than 45 days to render that report. But if you've got any questions at all about this, about the process, about anything that you want to know about the street, it looks good to me, and everything I've heard leads me to believe that it's okay. So I don't want to say that this is sort of a pro forma exercise, but it's looking good so far. The other thing related to that is we still hold a performance bond to secure the construction of that road. And Pulte has formally requested the release of that bond. So similarly, I'm going to get a report from DPW, just getting their okay that there's no issues we would need to draw from that bond for. In which case, you should be able to vote to release that. If that can be a discussion for the next agenda, that would be great to keep us on track for that. The other thing that I was hoping to be able to do at the next meeting.
Before you go to the next, did you mention, has the engineer signed off on it too? Everything. Every time I've talked to them about it, they've said, and they basically gave the okay to initiate this process in the first place. Okay. I haven't sort of sat down and said, please, can you write a letter saying okay? I will do that. And I suspect that the answer is going to be it's okay. And if it's not, we'll figure out what the issues are and how to get them rectified. But again, I think everything that I've been dealing with this project has led me to believe that the road is in good shape. Okay, and so you'll send us the plans or whatever written materials, because I would like to try to spin by and just take a look. I'm a visual person.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
know that
so-
we need to schedule a specific site walk. I guess everybody could feel free to go on their own if it's pretty obvious. Do you think it's pretty obvious, Tim?
Yeah, so we have as-built plans, and then I can redistribute the approved subdivision plans. And again, we'll solicit comment from those town departments, just making sure that they're all, okay. We did, one thing I'll say is we did deal with an issue of, the school bus being able to get, around the cul-de-sac. So I think there was some modification made to some of the curbs up on the cul-de-sac. But that's the type of thing that, again, we wanted to make sure we got straightened out before we sort of started the formal process of doing this. So you'll have all that information ready to go for your next meeting.
Tim, the last time I drove up there were a lot of trees that looked like they were either severely in distress or were really dying. I assume that's something that we should be part of it, so we're not having to replant street trees out of our town budget.
Let me. You're right to raise that as a concern. I want to make sure we're not kind of mixing the peanut butter with the chocolate here. We may have. I want to talk to the building commissioner about that and kind of look through the special permit and
That'd be
see
great.
kind of what that says. I don't want to be in a position where if the road is built and it's okay, that we're sort of holding it up for something that has a different enforcement mechanism.
Yeah, we can't really do that. If it's a performance bond for the completion of the road, that's all we can look at for that.
Yeah. So, but we'll want to make sure that everything before they leave town. We'll want to kind of do kind of a punch. We've been working on that sort of thing, for a little bit now. So we'll take a look through the conditions in the special permit, see what we can do about that. So I'll look through that too. I'll work with the building commissioner on that one. The other thing that I wanted to do was to brief the planning board on. We recently received from the Department of Housing and Community Development guidance on the MBTA community zoning legislation that was passed last January. This is a big deal for towns that are in the sort of MBTA catchment area. Significant rezoning that's going to be required of the town, if we want to remain eligible for certain state grant programs. I've sent you the information. The website that DHCD maintains is very informative. They update it consistently. There's a new frequently asked question page. I can resend that link just so you got it kind of top of your inbox. But I want to sort of give you guys a detailed briefing as to what compliance looks like. And we'll have to start thinking about, how we're going to work that into our plans and priorities for the coming year. There's a lot of technical assistance that's available. There's going to be a lot of discussion in towns throughout the Commonwealth. So we want to just give you guys as much information as we can, and then kind of figure out, what next step. I don't want to go too far into it now because we're already 20 after. But we can have a detailed discussion about it next time. And that's it for my staff update.
Excellent, thank you. All right, our next agenda item is citizens speak. Do we have anyone here in the attendees who would like to speak on any topic? We usually save the topics for the agenda, but you may want to talk on any topic. I'm not seeing any hands, so would anyone else mind just checking? Because sometimes I miss hands, but I don't see any hands. Oh, good, thank you. All right then, on to the next item, new business. Okay, so we have our guest tonight from Dodson and Flinker on the Milton Village Design Guidelines. Let's see. Oh, good evening. How are you tonight?
How are you guys? Nice to see you all.
Very good, very good. Nice to see you, Mr. Sussman and Mr. Flinker.
Hello.
Hello.
So I'll just very briefly, by way of introduction, you all remember the team from Dodson and Flinker. They are working on design guidelines for the Milton Village Overlay District. We have been, they've been working very hard on evaluation of existing law. I'm not going to steal too much of their thunder. Dylan did ask me for some time to come to the planning board to kind of talk through next steps and give an update as to, the work they've been up to and their progress so far. Take it away, guys.
Sounds good. Thanks for having us. So we have a presentation tonight and we want to intersperse it with some discussion as we go along. There's some key topics we want to talk about, get your perspective on, and just make sure that we're all on the same page. So this is kind of like a intro to design guidelines, because we're not sure how much experience all of you have with that. Okay, and also an intro to the project. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so here we are. It's tonight. I got the date right. I did the first thing that I often do. Okay, so we're going to talk about the project backgrounds, just quickly, the zoning, do an intro to design guidelines, and then we want to talk about the next step.
Dylan, do you mind just quickly introducing yourself for the crowd at home?
Sure. I'm sorry. I'm Dylan Sussman from Dodson and Flinker. We're a planning and landscape architecture firm located in Northampton, Mass. And we were hired by the town of Milton through a competitive process to produce design guidelines for the Milton Village mixed-use overlay district. And also with us tonight is Peter Flinker.
Good evening. Yeah, I'm Peter Flinker, and we had the pleasure of touring the village last fall on a beautiful day, and glad that we're able to move forward tonight.
All right. And then so towards the end, we want to talk about a public forum, which is a crucial next step in the process. Ideally setting a date for that and going over our ideas for that. Okay, so I think all of you on the board are familiar with the project area, but just in case people are watching from home, it's Milton Village, and the project area roughly covers Adams Street from Kenton Ave up to Elliott Street and down Wharf Street, and also includes High Street. This project is 18 years in the making. So I want to recognize that we're new to it, and board members and other people in the community have had a lot of participation in this and know a lot about this area. And so we want to make sure that we capture what they know, but also don't reinvent the wheel or spend too much time on things that have already been covered and established. So there's a pretty good history of planning reports and presentations that we've reviewed to make sure that we know what's known and we can move forward in determining what else needs to be figured out. The overlay district, as we understand it, has these boundaries. So it's part of the Milton Village Central Ave Business District. And the text that was adopted says it's that portion of the district which is east of a north-south line drawn through the point on Elliott Street, which is at the parcel boundary of assessor's parcel E22. So this here is assessor's parcel E22. And we assume that means a north-south line drawn through the western portion of parcel E22, which corresponds to what various presentations just showed and described before the zoning was adopted. The basic difference between the business district and the overlay district is that the overlay district has greater than 4,000 square foot lot area, minimum lot area, requires 20 feet of frontage. It allows a height bonus for certain conditions up to 4 stories or 48 feet. Sets a maximum floor area ratio, requires a certain amount of ground floor commercial use, has lower parking requirements, requires multifamily units, multifamily housing, and requires greater or equal to 12% affordable units with incentives for more affordable housing. That's the basics of the zoning. There are design standards in the overlay zone. I apologize to the planning board if this is all like stuff you know, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. So there are design standards in the zoning. They cover a variety of topics, a fair amount about massing and setbacks and step backs, some about sidewalks, some things about architectural details, some dealing with parking structures and surface parking and vehicular access, landscape lighting, and signs. So those are already in the zoning. And the zoning also says that in addition, there should be, that the planning board has excuse me, I'm just going to move my Zoom screen here. The planning board has the authority to adopt additional design guidelines. So two key questions for us just getting started are how you plan on administering that and who the audience is. So there are basically two ways that communities in Massachusetts deal with design guidelines. Some communities have adopted design guidelines and established a specialized design review board. Others do it and they basically incorporate design guidelines into their normal special permit or site plan approval processes. And based on the way it's set up in your zoning, we're assuming that the latter is the preferred method, that the planning board would use these design guidelines to as part of their special permit review. In terms of the audience, our assumption is that the audience are the permit applicants themselves, so that they come in knowing what it is that you all want. The planning board, who is reviewing the project, so they have greater clarity about how to interpret the design standards that are in the zoning and other special permit criteria. And then also abutters and residents, so that they have a greater sense of predictability about what's going to happen in this area. Are we on the right track there?
Yeah, I mean, I would think that it would be the planning board. We're not going to have a separate design review board. We have a hard enough time getting people to volunteer for other boards and commissions as it is. I can't imagine setting up something different. I don't know what everybody else's thoughts are, but I think it would be the planning board.
Okay.
I think that's what was envisioned.
Okay, I was just wondering with Cheryl, because Cheryl spent a great deal of time on this, more than any of us, I think. So I want to hear from her.
All right. Great. One thing checked off. Okay, so what's the difference between design guidelines and design standards? So design guidelines are supposed to be sort of flexible qualitative measures. They're often should or may language. They allow a broad range of outcomes and they may or may not be binding. Design standards should be objective, quantitative, preferably, often. They're usually say shall or must. There's a more narrow range of outcomes and they're typically more binding. So the difference there is basically between design guidelines are more flexible, and that flexibility cuts both ways, both for the applicant and for the reviewing boards. The design standards are more predictable. And I think what's intended by having design guidelines for the Milton Village Overlay District is to get into topics the design guidelines don't cover because you want to allow more flexibility, but still want to have a say on them. And also to provide information that will help you determine whether a project meets the design standards. So the design standards that are in the zoning right now, some of them are clear and you could easily say whether a project meets or does not meet the design standard. Other of them are more nebulous. You may not know whether the project meets it or not without further guidance. So in a way, the standards that are in the zoning are sort of a mix of standards and guidelines themselves. And so I view the guidelines that we're working on as a way to further interpret the guideline language that's currently in your standards. You all with me?
Well, no, I think that makes sense. I mean, I think that we had the language, as you pointed out, in the zoning, and that would sort of be the kind of, the basic framework, basic things that we wanted. I think, going back to Cheryl, is that I would think that we want to have flexibility in the design guidelines because we don't really know what kind of projects we're going to be getting.
Yeah, we wanted a combination of both because the standards provides some reassurance to residents that certain parts of design would be mandatory. And that was part of the decision making, the sort of acceptance, if you will, or support,
Yeah.
if you will, of the zoning. And some things that were suggested to us at the time, we felt would better be addressed in a guideline rather than a standard. And so we reassured people that are residents that we would do the guidelines. So we want to give enough standards to make sure that it would be clear to developers what we were looking for, but not be so prescriptive that there's only one way to design something.
Great. Good.
But I do think the idea that the guidelines will help interpret the words is a good thing because, or help explain the words. And I think designers probably will understand the words fairly well, but it could be helpful for this planning board and future planning boards to have some graphic that goes along with the words.
Great.
Okay. So, I guess our opinion, and having looked at a lot of design guidelines, it seems like they basically boil down to two things. The first is a set of development or design principles. And the second is a system of criteria for assessing proposals' ability to attain those principles. So the first kind of tells you, it's sort of like your goal, it's where you're aiming. And it may explain why it is you want to do something. And then the second tells you whether or not you're meeting that target or ways in which you would meet that target or not meet that target. Kathleen, did you want to say something?
No,
Okay.
I was just going, okay.
All right. So at the top level, the principles that we think sort of animate the design guidelines are the purpose statement of the zoning, right? Which includes a mix of kind of goals, like contributes to the revitalization of the business district, or encourages investment near transit, or increases the range of housing types and strengthens the tax base. Those are kind of the reasons you're doing this, right? And then there are other things in there that there are also reasons you're doing it, but they're much more subjective, I guess I would say. So to allow a high quality mixed use development. So what does high quality development mean? Or to enhance the historic context. What does enhancing the historic context mean? So we can probably say clearly whether a project strengthens the town's tax base or not. But it's harder to say whether it enhances the historic context. And so we see the design guidelines as a key tool for determining with greater clarity what high quality mixed use development is, what enhancing historic context is, what revitalization or vitality of a district means. Those sorts of language that often is in zoning but isn't clearly explained.
Yep.
Another key part of sort of the overarching sort of like top level principles of this is comes from the background work that was done for the planning of the zoning and the presentations that were developed for that. So one example is a set of drawings that were in a MPIC presentation in September of 2019. So this shows existing conditions. This is Adams Street here and High Street here. And then it shows a build out vision. And so we want to stop here and say, and ask you, like, to us, it shows us something, and we can use it as the basis of design guidelines, you know, to complement the purpose statement that's in the zoning and the other written material that went along with the plans that were the basis of the zoning. So we can use it as, it gives us a sense of what you want and what the design guidelines should say, but we want to make sure that you all agree that this is what you want before we start producing design guidelines that are based upon it. So, you know, there's some key ideas that are here that are reflected in the design standards. For example, having step backs away from existing historic structures, having step backs on upper stories of buildings that are sort of contextual, varying the setback of the building to match adjacent structures, or structures, in this case, a retaining wall, breaking the massing of buildings into smaller masses, varying the roof lines. So those sorts of things. So my question for you is does this match your vision for Milton Village? Is there anything here that doesn't fit? Is there something that's missing?
Well, there's one thing I noticed is that you've put in a new building in the parking lot on the sort of the upper part of the slide on High Street, and that isn't in blue. That's a new building.
So
Yeah.
Kathleen, they pulled this from the MPIC work, so you can see down there
okay.
between, and yeah, and frankly, this is work that I did, so you can critique it. It's okay. This building in the back was just another test. These were tests, you know, of the zoning to see how the language would translate. So it was presented as, this is not design, this is not solutions necessarily, but this is the way one could interpret the language that's in the standards. So, or this is the way a build out might work. And it was used to explain how setbacks and stepbacks and modulation and planar differences could work. And this one was, you're right, this was should have been blue. And there were times, and there were lots of different presentations. So I'm not sure which one this was pulled from, but that should have been a blue in this presentation. So that would have been my mistake back when, rather than theirs. But anyway, so I just want to give you that background.
But I think going back to your question, I think that's what we were looking for when we were talking about the overlay district was, you know, buildings step back, you know, protection of the historic structures. I mean, I think that's all correct. And I think that's what, you know, we were hoping that the overlay district would create is the ability to, you know, not just build a block of, you know, something in glass, but to, you know, to recognize the sort of existing, you know, building insets and tucks and nooks and crannies that are in the buildings that are there now.
Yeah, so the other thing I'll point out about the one in the back that Kathleen highlighted, that is actually the massing of a building in East Milton. It's where the physical therapy office is. It came before the planning board. The Connolly Development was the developer of it. But sometimes it's helpful for people to take a building they've seen and they know the scale of and see it in a different context. It kind of helps place things in scale. So that's what this was too. That just a point of reference, but it also would have met the zoning requirements here. But as far as if you have different ideas about what you think would make sense in terms of whether this is the starting point and the point that we want to go forward with, I would like to hear them. But at least you understand what the feedback that we were getting was a concern for the single family homes that have historic characteristics and qualities to them. What we talked about was High Street having a lot of different scale characteristics than Adams Street, and that the brick buildings and the scale of the buildings on Adams being quite a bit different than the wood frame structures on High. So that this was also used to demonstrate that when you have through lots, your character can respond to two different characters on either side. And this flat roof that architecturally we know is commonly used is not a view that this is never a view that you see when you're experiencing on the ground, right? So that your perception would be some variety in roofscapes, which exists in the district. But then also that when you get to this side, to the High Street side, it should respond more to the High Street. And Meredith wasn't on the planning board at the time, but she, on the historical commission, provided a lot of feedback onto those ideas, into those ideas.
And there is a sort of a planning and a thinking by the historical commission in a local historic district that we are looking as a town at local historic districts. And it would be nice to have sort of some language and standards that would be sort of teed up to make it easier to incorporate into a local historic district. Thinking, a lot of these buildings, there will probably be some definitely new development. I think language that would, new buildings can have a timeless and classic architecture that connects with the older buildings, turn of the century buildings. I would love to see language that sort of gives it some class, even though modern buildings can have classic design elements in connection with all of the language that you were using with the setbacks and sort of the undulation as you walk up the streetscape. I think is excellent too, that working off some of your original language, but to see continuity throughout the district, I think is really important to creating a real cohesive feel, even with new structures, having sort of a timeless design.
Yeah, I mean, I think that definitely one of the key questions for this project is how to incorporate new development with the historic character, especially given that the historic character is pretty variable. This area was built out in several different phases and has remnants of all those different phases.
Right.
So there's some common characteristics amongst the buildings, but there's also a lot of diversity. And diversity of not just in the details, but also in things like Cheryl was talking about in the scale. So we have been looking at that and would love to talk to you guys about it more. But we're not going to get into it too much tonight. All right. So I guess the sense I'm getting is that this does seem to reflect the evolution of the thinking behind the zoning.
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah, and Cheryl, to answer, to respond to your question of if there are things that we see like that to do different, I mean, I think that overall this does make sense. And I think that the next step with the design guidelines is to try to get into some of the details a little bit more. So for example, what do we want this sidewalk to look like? Or how do we want these buildings that are on a pretty reasonable slope to deal with that grade change from the top of the street to the bottom, or from the front of the lot toward the back? Is a big retaining wall what you want, or do you want something different? Do you want a consistent grade along the building, or should the building be stepping down, and that sort of thing?
Yeah, one of the things I'm not sure is explicit in the guidelines, but something that's, I think, maybe been discussed since, is some view corridors from high, so that you're not a solid wall. And you can kind of see it here. I can't point with my
Yeah.
cursor, but you can see where there's some of those opportunities kind of opened up. And
One here and one
right,
here.
yes. And so even if there was an opportunity, I know this is all private property, but if there was even an opportunity for some kind of physical connection, so you didn't have to go all the way around to the streets, you know,
Yeah.
that's sort of that pedestrian connection, and those view corridors could be something that could be built into the guidelines, like, because I don't think that that's really fleshed out too much in the standards.
Yeah. Great. That's very helpful. All right.
That's a great idea.
Just ask a question, Dylan.
Sure.
Having gone through that process, what parts of the sort of the design intent of this do you think people were most confused about, or perhaps didn't understand well enough to accept?
Well, I think most people would just say we're concerned about scale. And one of the things that I tried to use a whole series of these analyses to do was to demonstrate how the topography influences the scale, how the corner, people are concerned about the corner when you wrap around Adams up Canton, and you have topographic change there as well. And you'll see, like, the building that's there now also has a wall on the street. Like I said, we don't really want walls on the street if we can help it, right? So where you're looking at new development, can we tuck parking in? Can we get that parking, take advantage of that topography and tuck that parking underneath, so we're not looking at surface parking? But the concerns, you know, in terms of scale was, well, how do you make sure you don't get big blocky buildings? You know, how do you get something that relates? So that's why for people to understand the tools, not just the design standards, but the dimensional tools, you know, that are in the zoning, how they set the size of the buildings as well. So like the FAR, for example, the height, for example, and how you can have the increased height for the density bonus on Adams that doesn't impact High Street, right? So there were those sorts of things, and others can chime in on what they recall hearing, but I don't think the zoning would have passed. Well, this is just my opinion after spending 3 years on it, but I don't think the zoning would have passed if we didn't do these kind of diagrams or these kind of analyses, you know, really taking a hard look at test fits. You know, our MAPC consultants did some test fits also, but really being more granular with the test fits, I think, help people become comfortable that the zoning, what we're trying to do is encourage a certain kind of development and make it clear, so when a developer comes in, they use that zoning and propose a project that's already meeting a lot of what people have expressed they would like to see, right? So that inviting streetscape with that topographic change is definitely challenging. You can kind of see it here, where I was suggesting that there might be places where you enter and that's the floor level, and then it steps across. But that could happen more than it does here. You know, it could be multiple places, so it's stepping more than this. But that is a challenge of this district, that slope, for sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think the planning that was done in the lead up to this, to adopting the zoning is great. It's really useful. It's very thorough. And so it's a really great resource for us. And I think people should be able to tell what you guys are looking for based on that.
Yeah, I think, Dylan, because I mean, what you were looking at on Adams Street, we already have big buildings on Adams Street. I mean, the existing chocolate factory buildings are pretty substantial, but there was a lot of concern about the impact on High Street, because those are sort of, you know, probably were originally sort of workers' cottages and that sort of thing. So they're much smaller scale than what's on Adams Street. And I think people were afraid that the size of buildings would sort of creep over to High Street, and that was sort of an issue. But I think with Cheryl's design, experiments that showed the way buildings could be, set back and adapted and shaped in a way that would lessen the impact on High Street. I think that was, a very successful part of the campaign.
Yep. Okay. Okay, so here's a list of potential topics for the design guidelines. This is based on things that are often in design guidelines, as well as looking at the design standards that are there and sort of taking a step back and grouping them into topics. So I guess this is a recommendation for things to cover in the design guideline. So consistency with a vision, historic character, and overarching design principles. That's what we've been talking about so far. Addressing streetscape, addressing buildings. I'm going to return to this later, so I'm just going to walk through it now. Access, circulation, and parking, landscaping, signage, lighting. Then there are a couple of things that weren't in the design standards that I think would make sense to include. So I didn't see anything in the design standards about open spaces and access to the rail trail and the waterfront, which seems like pretty crucial things in this district. Sustainability, is included in the master plan, but there aren't really direct standards in the zoning about it. And then there's a district improvement incentive. So it's worth considering whether you want to identify some priorities for those district improvements, so people know what you want when they're applying for that incentive. I'm going to walk through some examples from other design guidelines, and then we can return to talking about these topics. And so these examples are both, this is what design guidelines can look like, and they're also examples of these topics, right? So here's an example from Arlington, showing how design guidelines related to architecture and massing. So at the top of the screen there, you've got encourage and discourage. These are sort of like principles, right? Mm-hmm. Encourage building heights between 3 and 4 stories, a range of heights that taper toward existing residential areas. Discourage excessive large buildings in close proximity to the bikeway. And then there are elements, for example, sloping roof shed water and relate to Arlington's historic character. So it's telling you both what to do and why you might want to do it, right? Mm-hmm. It is a roof and you do it because it sheds water. That's why we've done sloping roofs in New England for a long time. So that's one way of doing it. In terms of the presentation here, you've got, a single 3D illustrative graphic that shows a lot of different ideas in one graphic. And then there are some pictures at the bottom that are just examples, but it's not really explained like what about those examples is the point. Mm-hmm. This is one from the United Kingdom. It's dealing with materials, and it's proposing that you have that both materials and the colors of those materials be of a unified palette. So it's saying if you have this palette here, it works to have a dark brick and a bronzed or blackened street cladding and gabion walls and blah, blah, blah. If you have this color palette here, you might have more what they call render, which I believe is stucco. Mm-hmm. Down at the bottom, we've got a mix of different kinds of brick, basically, and colored panels and window fascias. So it's dealing with materials, and it's doing it through photos, essentially, but with an overarching concept behind those photos. This is an example from Arlington. Again, different topic. This is residential design guidelines, different firm. Again, there's an illustration, but it's used in a different way. it's dealing with basically a single topic. So the design principle is that front yards should add life to the streetscape and feel inviting. And this is showing you just that one concept. And then the photos are arranged in, good and bad, which is pretty common in design guidelines. It's a little less common these days as it was originally, but still very effective. Another example from the United Kingdom. This one is organized, it has priorities. So streets and circulation should be green, distinctive, inclusive, and healthy. It has a design principle. And then it has very detailed standards for the dimensions of streets and sidewalks. So it's getting to a greater level of specificity than the ones we've seen in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one thing I noticed, I think it was on one of your plans, which I was impressed. It really talked about the size that a tree pit should be and actually how deep it should be built. And I think that's part of, been our problem is that when trees have been put in, the tree pits are a variety of sizes. They're often not large enough. They're, these are very high pedestrian walkways with people with dogs. How do we, really plant trees properly to want them to succeed and thrive in this area? So that, I like that.
Okay. So for you, that level of specificity is useful when it's addressing a problem that you have. Okay. Another example, this one from Cambridge, couple of big photos and more, I guess, more guideline. It's more vague. It's more flexible. So incorporate public art as an integral component of the development's architecture and landscape design. And where possible, integrate arts related uses such as artist galleries, artist studios on the ground floor of affordable housing developments that are located on business and commercial streets. So that's a little bit more specific, right? They're saying not only do we want public art, but we want space for artists and galleries on the ground floor. But this one's kind of mostly text and photos and not super detailed. This is from Framingham. So more detailed text and then photos with captions that explain what it is, what the intention is. So that's another way of going about doing this. And then I think this is my last example. So this one deals with accessibility, again, from that Bradford Homes and Neighborhood Design Guideline in the UK. Thought this one was interesting because they put in a quote, which I found quite nice. As a wheelchair user, I don't expect to have to slalom around wheelie bins every time I try to get along the pavement, right? So it's explaining to you why it is that you should care about this, why neighborhoods should be designed to be inclusive and accessible for all. And then with a graphic that shows the difference between a street with a lot of clutter of signs and light posts and so on, and then one that's more organized and more accessible.
Well, we have a problem with the pitch anyway. I mean, going to be great going downhill, not so terrific going up.
Right. Yeah, I think you can't get around that challenge, but you can get around, you can improve the accessibility or make buildings accessible once you've reached the edge of the property, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is actually the last one. So this one from another one from the UK. I included this one, it's about sustainability. And I thought it's an interesting example because what it's doing in a lot of these points is referring out to other standards. So it's referring out to non-residential buildings to achieve BREEAM excellence. So in the US, that might be like, you should achieve LEED whatever, or you should do the Living Building Challenge, or you should participate in the Sustainable Sites Initiative and achieve this level of certification. So one way of dealing with sustainability or any other topic is if there's an existing standard or guideline that you can refer out to, it saves you the work of having to define everything.
Mhm.
I'm curious whether you guys think that's worthwhile. So looking at all of those, I'm interested in your feedback on which ones you think are a good approach for Milton Village.
Can I make one suggestion? If you
Sure.
were to look at what you see are the defining features of certain, like, I think most people would say the masonry buildings, particularly, the couple of bigger ones, have a lot of character to them. And if you took a photo of it and you said, okay, what about this, gives it its character. So you say
Yeah.
it might be that the size of the window openings, or it might be the level of detail at the entrance, or whatever it is. And if you did the same thing, what are sort of the defining characteristics of High Street? And you just showed a couple of photos and you kind of pointed out. Because then when you say, like materials, when you get to materials or scale or windows or some of those things that, you have a point of reference to, right? So that's, and then as far as the open space and the question about, well, it wasn't in this guideline piece. I think it was in one of your other things. So I'll hold that thought. But I do think sort of the photograph, it's almost like the one in the upper right there, but maybe a bit more specific, right? Like that's just looking at that one characteristic. But if you took, let's say, the Irwin building, which is, I'm forgetting the address, right at the corner of Wharf and Adams Street, nice masonry building.
60
A lot of the, thanks, Miranda. If you took that building, for example, and you said, okay, roofscape has a certain, you could address roofscape there, you could address relationship to the sidewalk, how wide is the sidewalk there? There's a number of things that could be a good example for. And then if you looked at the cluster of buildings towards the Elliott Street side of High Street, there's sort of that cluster in and of itself is what was identified in the application to the Mass Historic Commission, because it was this grouping. And my recollection is that those were just, as Kathleen said, worker housing, and then they got subdivided over time to add additional housing. So it was kind of an incremental thing. And the Stephen O'Donnell, the chair of the Historical Commission, I think, is one who sent an email to me some time ago about, it's not so much the individual character of one of those buildings, it's the grouping of them. And so it's like you might, have that sort of comment, right? So so that the reason that's kind of important is you wouldn't want to put a big blocky building on that street then, right? Because it doesn't relate to that sort of multiple building kind of characteristic. So that to me seems like, then I do think getting into materials would be great. And the streetscape components, I think the landscape components, but I think we need that other piece first.
Well, as I said, I think that there's, as you say, there's two sort of looks. There's Adams Street with the chocolate factory buildings, the big masonry buildings, the wonderful brick details, all that sort of thing. And then the sort of more, residential, worker housing side of High Street. So you couldn't sort of have uniform throughout the district.
Yeah, so the other thing about the masonry, what does that detail do? Well, it creates shadow, it provides texture, like what do the large windows do? They break down the scale because they have multiple lights, so those strategies don't have to be exactly the same in new construction, but those strategies could draw from that historic construction. Because as we all know, we don't build the buildings the way those were built anymore. A lot of people I know think it's unfortunate, but we wouldn't hit any of our sustainability goals either if we built them like that anymore. Anyway, I think that would be a great starting point myself.
I agree. And, colors and materials. And there's also just down in that area, there's some shingle style mill buildings. So there's a context, to see some shingle, natural shingles down in that area as well as clapboard. So that's something that also could, and as you go into Milton Hill, it's all shingle style homes, many, many shingle style homes. But the brick, and just going back to what Cheryl said, right now there are some concrete retaining walls, doing away with that. And if there is a need for retaining walls, not having like the concrete block walls, I think that would detract. Having something more, I think, I forget if it's in there, if it's to have a stone facade of some kind. You think about the base of these buildings, you just don't want to see concrete bases. You like to see something that's, or walls that are a little bit more of a stone facade.
Okay. All right. That's helpful.
Yep. And then windows, I think going back to what Cheryl was saying too, and giving examples of windows, having something that's with divided light windows gives a consistency, even though it can be a new building, it can give some consistency to that area and not data building.
So I think what I'm hearing is that establishing the existing conditions and what's drawing principles from those is really important. And Cheryl suggested doing that by annotating photos, which is, I think, a really effective way of doing that, a good idea.
You could also add some drawing to that or some kind of diagram to that, if you feel that would be helpful, but or some combination of diagrams and photos with annotations.
Yep. How about the amount of text? Do you guys want,
I feel like a picture's worth 1,000 words. Sorry, I interrupted you, but.
Well, that's the basic question. There's sort of like spare text, trying to get it down to as few words as possible. There's, using a fair amount of text so that you can really get into a lot of ideas. And then there's maybe something in between. There are advantages to all of that, right? If you have more text, you can communicate more ideas, and you can have more to speak to an applicant about that's down on paper. On the other hand, it's more things to argue about. So I'm curious where you guys fall on the, how much text do you want? Which is related to how much detail do you want?
Well, I mean, I was going back to the thought that these are design, guidelines, not standards. It
Yeah.
seems to me that they would have therefore fewer words, because you would want to have more flexibility. I mean, the more that you sort of put down in cement in writing, the less flexibility you've got. And I going to Cheryl's point of a picture is worth 1,000 words. I think that's, probably right. And we do have pretty strong design elements in the district already. So really what you'd be trying to do, I think, and the message we got from the residents who spoke was, sort of enhancing the existing appearance. And going to Meredith's point too, is that, carrying over into new construction, the sort of, the design elements of the existing. I mean, it's a pretty impressive array of buildings that's there now. And I think what we would like to see, and I think what the residents wanted to see is sort of a continuation of that pattern in new development.
I think the interesting thing about what you said in terms of variety is, I think there could be any number of design solutions that could work because of that variety. I mean, like, I think Meredith's right in pointing out that the extra space storage now, but that used to be part of Baker Chocolate. I mean, there's that big, hefty brick building, and then you've got those two small buildings right next to it, right on the water there, and it's coherent, So, I think it's, it invites creativity because there's a lot you can draw from, and so I think one thing would be to encourage people to really carefully look at what's there, when they're making their proposal and start at the larger scale of the massing and then work your way down into the detail. And that massing wants to be reflective of what's near it, right? So it wants to be respectful to what's near it. So I would encourage the guidelines to start at that big level and kind of, highlight these two different characteristics, or the characteristics at least of High and Adams, but there's others that you could go into, like, you've got the water. I mean, reality is the Webb Mill building owner is likely to come before us as one of the first projects that's going to utilize this overlay. And so there's the waterfront there. What does that look like as compared to, the open space waterfront of the landing? I think
And that's one of the things that, Jonathan wants to do, is to have sort of an open space around that area that could be, sort of a recreation area, and, getting off the bike path and coming and having a gathering area down there.
Yeah, that was one of the questions at the warrant committee. Somebody asked about making sure that you could you take off the bike and get a beer at the brew pub. He was gonna make sure that there was some bike parking for that availability. But yeah, it was pretty funny.
Well, there's only one bike ring right there at that building, because I use it as when I ride to the gym, so no one else can park there when I'm there. But I think that in terms of open space, there's really different characteristics there too, because you've got, like we said, the river, and then you've got our little harbor, and then you've got this sort of connection between High and Adams down to down Wharf Street there. It's a small but rich district, and the new development needs to be very responsive to that, I guess.
I just wanted to say we have about 5 minutes and then would be coming into our hour of time on this item. But I did want to say, I liked the diagram of the sidewalk, but the challenge for us is the sidewalks are going to be much more narrow than this, so we can't do all these great things. And I liked your point about not wanting clutter on the sidewalk, but things like the street lamps and having continuity and things, making the best of the little sidewalk that we have with the street trees and those things. But I was agreeing with what everyone else was saying about the visual will make a big difference, and then the words to provide any guidance would be really helpful, because we're in a tight space here. So the more guidance we can provide the applicants, I would assume would be helpful for everyone. I liked Meredith's idea of taking, or maybe it was Cheryl, a combination of Cheryl and Meredith, but taking photos of some of the architectural features that are there now, sort of sprinkled around, and providing that for as a way to get them thinking about tying it into their surroundings. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I agree.
Want to talk about the public forum and kind of scheduling that and what we think the content of that is going to be?
Yep. Okay, so public forum, we'd like to schedule it. So do you guys have a sense of when that would work into your schedule? Ideally, it would be, I guess, in February.
So do you expect to come back to us with some progress before that session?
So what we thought is we would have a similar kind of conversation at the public forum as we had tonight. Use a similar presentation, but have time for people to talk about the existing conditions in greater detail. So we would walk through, we'd have a presentation similar to what we did tonight. Talk a little bit more about the existing conditions in that presentation and the historic precedents, basically. Then have breakout groups where people talk about what they think is important about the existing conditions, look at some development examples from other places, talk about what's, appropriate or inappropriate from those, and then try to narrow in on design principles for key topics, building on what's already clear from the past work. So that's our idea for the public forum. And we feel like we could probably do that soon. And then coming out of that, we would do kind of an inventory and recommendations memo to you guys, review that, and then move into, actually writing the design guidelines. Or
Yeah, I
drawing
think you're
them.
gonna, sorry, Danny, go ahead.
Were you thinking the public forum would be another Zoom call? Or were you hoping to actually be in a public setting with the public?
I think at this point, it's probably a Zoom call.
Yeah, I was thinking so. Okay. What were you going to say, Cheryl?
I just think it would be important to have photographs in that presentation, photographs of the district.
Yeah.
And the variety of conditions that exist, both public realm and architecture.
Yep. Yeah, we would definitely.
Yeah, I think that's a good
include that.
idea. And I think we have to do it on Zoom. I don't think people would come in a crowd if it was in person.
That's
If
what I
it
was
were.
going to say.
Yeah.
Thank you so.
Thinking of your experience, Denny, I don't think they want to do that.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to.
So I guess the first question is, does that plan for a public forum, as simple as it is, does that make sense to you guys? And then can we get a date on the calendar?
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, if you want to do February, I wouldn't do February vacation, although I don't know what that really looks like this year, but in terms of COVID, people still may try and do something. So I think that's usually the week of.
I think it's the week of the 14th this year.
Okay, so it's late, it's earlier than President's Day. Okay, so
I'm away the 21st to the 27th. So I would.
so that's the week after that vacation. So you'd be looking at either the 28th or the week of the 7th.
Do you guys feel like the week of the 7th, which is it's a smidge less than a month, is enough time to publicize something so we get a reasonable turnout?
Tim, are you with us?
Yeah, I think we could, if we made a good effort to do something, next week to spread the word. Next week is my calendar's all messed up now. So next week would be the 17th, 18th, 19th. Yeah, I think, that would give us a good 2 to 3 weeks to kind of, pound the pavement and spread the word. So I think, I think that will be fine.
Are you sure that school vacation week is the 14th? I'm looking at.
I just looked it up and it's the 21st,
Yeah.
All right, so
21st, 25th.
Yeah, because it's usually that falls with President's Day. All right, so.
yeah, I was thinking of April, sorry.
Okay.
So how
Okay,
about the week of
so-
the 14th? Is that better?
A little better.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you guys have
And
a
I-
preferred day of the week?
I like Thursdays if others agree.
Um,
Or
yeah, it's just, I'm,
We
What
have a
time
meeting
are
on
you
the
thinking?
10th.
what time are you thinking?
Whatever works for your community.
I'm teaching a seminar all day and I have CPC meeting at 6.
all right, what about the 15th or 16th?
Both of those are fine. Yep.
Okay. Rich and Cheryl, are the 15th and 16th good?
The 15th is not, but the 16th is good.
Okay. I'm just waiting for Rich to weigh
I'm
in.
just, sorry,
Okay.
I'm just looking.
That's okay. 16th.
Yeah,
Okay. What do we think of 7 o'clock, guys.
Fine.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so I have 7 PM on the 16th. Great.
Okay, so we'll get that. Dylan, I'll work with you all to, coordinate and figure everything out. Do you, I've seen it done before. I've never done it personally. Do you have experience running a breakout room in Zoom?
Yep, we've
Okay,
done,
good.
done them with hundreds of people.
Well, maybe we'll get hundreds. Yeah, we'll and we'll spread the word and Cheryl and Meredith, I think I'll probably want to talk to each of you to kind of I feel like between the work that was done previously and Meredith, you live over there, you might have the best networks to kind of spread the word on this.
Yeah, we can let the residents know, the neighborhood association. Yeah.
Yep.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work.
Thank
That was
you.
great.
Yeah.
Great
right, guys.
ideas.
Great.
All
Good
right.
to see you all.
Thanks a lot. Have a good one.
Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
You too. Have a nice night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
So I'm going to ask the fire station team to just, if you want to be in, raise your hand and I'll add you to the panel. I think that was everybody.
Welcome.
So this is the consultant team that is working with the Fire Station Building Committee, Context Architecture, Bowler Engineering, CBA Landscape Architects. You all can introduce yourselves in a minute. So just to give everyone sort of context, I mean, we're all very, very familiar with the Fire Station Building project, mostly from budget and town meeting votes. And now we actually get to finally talk about the things themselves, which is nice. This is a public building project, obviously, not necessarily subject to the same zoning and permitting requirements that you get from another sort of type of commercial private project. But the committee is definitely interested in getting feedback from both town staff, who we've been in pretty close contact with this team, and also from relevant boards and committees. So this isn't site plan approval, so don't make it site plan approval. But I think they're definitely interested in hearing hearing your insights and getting some advice and comments. What I will say is let's have a good discussion tonight. But I think if there are any issues that you think kind of raise to the surface that are particularly relevant, that we may want to sort of correspond directly with the select board about them, just because this is ultimately a select board committee, and if there's things that you feel are important enough, that's how we'll do it. But I think there's plenty to talk about here. We're just doing the headquarters building tonight, so I'm not going to steal any more thunder. So if you all could just introduce yourselves real quick, and then you should have screen sharing capabilities and you can just take it away.
All right, well, I'll go first. I'm Jeff Shaw. I'm principal at Context Architecture.
I am Peter Nelson, project architect at Context Architecture.
I am Mark Wickstead with Bowler. I'm a senior project manager.
I am Brad Johnson, also with Bowler, project engineer.
Megan Tompkins. I'm a principal at CBA Landscape Architects.
And I believe I'll be driving the car today. Jeff, if you want to kick us off at the beginning. One of us three had to drive, and I volunteered. So
all right, great. Well, while you while you get that rolling, I'm going to ask Peter to sort of dive into the sheets of the architectural set, but I'll give kind of the overview. I think, as Tim said, you all know pretty much the project. We're talking about headquarters solely tonight. I think you all know there's 2 other fire stations out there. Given the timing and everything, we didn't feel it was worth at this point, because those are going to be a little bit further down the road. We weren't going to overwhelm your meeting with 3 different buildings. So we're going to focus only on the headquarters. The project team has been working, I think, for several years now directly with the committee to develop this building, worked with the historic district as well to get their thoughts and opinions about what should happen to the existing fire headquarters. The project has to undergo a number of different phases in order to be built and fit into the town center configuration. We also worked with the master planning group that was formed. Actually, we got formed before they were, and we sort of got the ball rolling a little bit on that process. And then as they started to get into their elements, they were able to give us feedback on our site planning, which has changed some of the elements on the site plan that we initially had, which was hopefully good changes. But the complications from the phasing do mean that the town will, the goal here, the town will be able to retain a parking lot while the construction is ongoing. So whether it's in the existing conditions or in the new configuration, that's a key component of the project, to maintain parking on the site while construction is ongoing. The project schedule, where we are right now, just to kind of give you the heads up, we intend to go out to bid in about a month. So we do have time to make some alterations, but as you can see, a month is not a lot of time considering the coordination would have to go on. So if there are comments tonight, we will do our best to address them. But we don't have a lot of time remaining. So happy to get feedback and see what we can do to incorporate it. With that, I'll turn it over to Peter, and you can walk everybody through the drawings.
All right, Peter.
Peter, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thanks. I will give a brief overview on the architecture and the strategy of the building. So the project includes a new construction of a 22,000 square foot new headquarters building that is adjacent to the current headquarters or fire station headquarters building. And in the design and construction of the new headquarters, that includes partial demolition of the existing headquarters building, which would be the more recent addition apparatus bays of that building. And then for this project, we will be renovating and restoring the exterior of the building, the roof, as well as the first floor interior of the existing headquarters building. So in these renderings show sort of the big picture approach to the building. This is the view from the backside of the town hall. So to the right is the existing headquarters building. So the new headquarters includes a 5-bay apparatus portion of the building, as well as a dormitory side with administrative offices, training rooms, and then the kitchen and day room for the firefighters. And then I think, Brad, you can go to the next slide. So you can see the comparison of the existing headquarters building and then the new headquarters building to the left. So the strategy here was to respond to sort of the more public approach to this site and coming from the town hall side. So a lot of curtain wall, transparency in the new headquarters, signage that clearly indicates you're at the fire station in an emergency or for public who are entering the site. And then in addition, the existing headquarters retains its historic character while also trying to tie into the new building with new curtain wall openings where the old apparatus bay doors were located. And then next slide, just moving around to the northwest view, looking from Walnut Street, the approach is to have a more residential scale because this portion of the building faces a more residential part of the neighborhood. So smaller openings, a breakdown in the volume of the building, and a variety of materials, including brick, metal panel, curtain wall. So then you can keep going, just looking back from the Walnut Street side, still emphasizing the openness of the apparatus bays, but again, with that breakdown in the volume, so it's not a huge elevation on the more residential side of the street. Go to the next slide, and then this is looking from the northeast side in relation to the existing headquarters and trying to maintain sort of the openness of this street elevation. So a couple other features of the building, we are proposing that it's capable to have solar panels on the roof. It is being designed with sustainability in mind, from all the systems to the materials. They will be LEED certifiable if that ever becomes the case. And I think that's about it, just for the general overview of the building layout, volume, materials.
Peter, let me jump in real
Sure.
quick. I forgot to mention something important at the beginning. One aspect of the design of the new building was that we actually held quite a number of meetings, the building committee did, that were open to the public, and there was a significant presence of the neighborhood that's immediately behind the station at those meetings, and they were instrumental in shaping the design and actually advocated for the contemporary look and the use of a large amount of glass on the building. They really wanted that. So that's also partly where some of those design elements came from. Okay.
I just had one question on some of these visuals. There are these like green box-like things. I was just trying to understand what they were.
Are you looking at this right here? I don't know if you can see my cursor. There's a green.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So that's the mechanical equipment transformer for the buildings. Those now will be the generators. I'm sorry, will be enclosed in a fence enclosure. Transformer is not expected to be enclosed, but this area where we have that service equipment will be enclosed and landscaped.
You probably best see it on the plans that we'll get into next.
Correct.
Which will show all those elements, the landscaping, the fencing, a lot of the screening materials there.
Yeah, you can see, as Jeff said, a lot of these have been developed more in the drawings.
Brad, can you flip back one page? Yep. So that's probably another box that you were looking at, sort of towards the left-hand side. That is the trash enclosure, and there's going to be, just totes, like toter bins, not a dumpster. And so they'll have that in recycling, and it's screened in that fenced-in area.
Question. Tim sent to us the site plan, landscape plan, etc. Are those able to be brought up? And I do have some questions about those. I don't have questions about the architectural presentation. Thank you for that.
Sure, that was exactly the next step. Okay. I was going to pass it off to, I think, CBA. Is that next?
Brad will go next.
Yeah, I'll jump in next. So just to, most of the time we give presentations, we like to give an aerial of where the site is. In this case, I'm sure you all are very aware of where we are. But just in the center here, we have the existing firehouse. You can see just based on the different roof colors, what part of the building was the addition, which will be removed to the project. And then on the right side will be the existing headquarters to remain. There's also 2 accessory buildings as part of the project that are also to remain. We have what's the chemical number 1 building to the east side of the site. And then just behind that to the north is an existing wooden garage. Today we have the parking on the west side and an access drive out to Walnut through the site. Circulation on the property today, you can come either in from Canton Ave on the east or Engine Road to the southwest, and around the town offices is a counterclockwise movement of vehicles. And so just jumping into the site plan now, which I know you've reviewed to date, is what will be the final condition of the project after all the phasing is complete. So just wanted to hit on a couple of key items here. You'll see the larger new headquarters building west of the existing building that's to remain. There's 3 parking areas now on the site. We have the northwest parking area off of Walnut Street. We have the northeast parking area up against the existing wooden garage, and between that and the existing headquarters building to remain. And then we have a small few bays of parking with our ADA spaces. In terms of parking numbers, we have 13 spaces over in the northwest. We have 36 spaces in the northeast, and then we have 5 spaces in this front section here. And this is also where our ADA spaces are. We have 3 ADA spaces, and that provides access to both the existing headquarters building to remain and the new headquarters building. As I mentioned, we had the initial circulation pattern that operated counterclockwise around the town offices. In the proposed conditions here, we're going to have 2-way traffic between the headquarters buildings and the town offices. And the reasons for this is to provide access from Engine Road over to this new northeast parking area. Couple of other key items I wanted to hit on. Jeff already spoke to the trash receptacle area, which looking at the plan is going to be over here on the north side of the site. We just talked about the enclosure surrounding some of the electrical equipment. We have a day 1 generator that will be within that wooden enclosure. We also have space for a future generator should it be required by the fire station. And then just right outside of the fence enclosure will be your transformer. In terms of stormwater, it's definitely something I wanted to point out that we're employing some LID, some low impact development techniques on this project. And those are located over here on the western portion of the site. So in this hatched area will be 2 rain gardens. So these will have like wetland seed mix that the grasses could withstand frequent inundation. And so we have a couple of techniques of getting water there, either through your typical pipe conveyance in the case of the new headquarters roof drains, or for some of the surface areas, both in front here by the 5 bays on the south side and the northwest side. We're just using grading techniques to sheet flow that runoff into these rain garden areas. So during larger storms, these will fill up and overtop into structures that will then go discharge to the municipal system for the site. And your lower volume storms, these will fill up and you'll just have natural infiltration in those areas. One other access piece I did want to hit on is over on the west side here. You'll notice we have a long walkway that runs from Walnut Street all the way down to Engine Road. And so what this walkway is setting up is future connections from Walnut Street down to the town offices. That wouldn't be in the purview of this project, but we showed, at least on the town hall side, how that connection may happen to provide access. So that'll give a nice pedestrian link from Walnut down into the middle of the town campus. I think that hit a lot of the high level stuff. I know you said there were some questions on the site plan specifically. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about those now. Megan did put together a nice rendering, which is, obviously a little bit better colored looking than what the engineer put together. But we can flip over to that if you wanted to go into landscape, or I'm happy to answer any questions on the civil site plan side now.
I'm okay seeing the landscape first, and then maybe that plan might suffice for some of my questions, since they're not engineering questions, really.
All right, cool. All right, well, with that, this is the rendering that Megan's team put together. Megan, if you want to take it from here.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Tompkins. Wow, I feel like we've talked about almost everything already. I mean, the main landscape development, or the sort of main landscape design area for this project is really the new courtyard that's created between the existing to remain building and the sort of new building. That courtyard is meant to welcome you into the new building. There's sort of a bit of a curvy, swoopy walk in with 2 seating areas, several benches, and several plant beds. As you can see, we're also adding quite a few new trees to the site. I think I was counting that it's about 20 shade trees and 4 smaller trees.
Which is great. That's great.
Are those actually net new? Because the drawings that I looked at showed the removal of a number of trees as well. Some of them as large as 30-inch caliper.
That is a good question.
Yeah, that was actually going to be one of my questions, is how many trees are being removed, and what's the total caliper being removed, and what are some of the species? So do you mind if I jump in now with some of the questions, since, or did you want to go through more first?
No, I mean, I feel like we've talked about most of the other things. One of the things I would like to mention about the sort of back of house areas is that those fences are going, fences around things like the generators and the, trash and recycling areas are going to be like a nice solid cedar board fence. No chain link, nothing, something pretty nice for screening. But it sounds like we want to talk about trees. I, however, did not do the demo and removals plan.
So maybe what I'll do is just put my tree questions out first, because then I do have a few others that are not tree related. But
sure.
When I was looking at this, and on the left side there, this building is removing some of not just the existing parking, but some of the green space, the park. And I do appreciate the pedestrian connection from the Council on Aging through that green space. But the trees that are along that pedestrian connection are all called out to be red maple. And I was just wondering if that was considered relative to the trees that are being removed there in that area. And it's kind of like a passive park green space. And I'm wondering about the alignment of the trees along the path being uniform. And then one other question on the trees that well, let me just stop there and let you answer that, because I do have a few more questions on the landscape.
Sure. Okay. So I am, so they are called out as being red maples, and we have just kept them very uniform. I think only because that sidewalk is such a straight shot, and the space feels so narrow that I wasn't really sure if there was much sense in, trying to clump them or make, a more organic shape with them. Happy to switch up the varieties a little bit though. If that.
Yeah, so maybe, I think, I'm not sure if it's a different.
Well, there's a variety of them there now. It's not all just one type. And so it would probably be nice to sort of have a mix.
Sure.
Just in case there's a blight that attacks red maples, you
Right.
wouldn't lose all of them at once.
Yes, yes, or some sort of drought condition or whatever's
Yeah, yeah.
coming in the future.
Yeah.
Yes, I hear you. I know.
You might
That's-
run for luck with something else.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
then-
I
Okay. I mean, I think if you could, it's really, for you to take a look at again, if you would, and just if there's a way maybe that whether it's necessary to keep them so sort of formally aligned there, kind of take a look at what's being removed and how it's not so orderly. And then there's 3, I think, shown as trees behind the generators, but the civil drawings show infiltration structures underneath there. And so I'm wondering whether those 3 trees can actually be located there.
That's a good question. I'll follow up with Brad and sort that out. I mean, there are other places I'm sure we could shift those trees closer to the, trash or what, you know.
Let me jump in here real quick. One of the
Sure.
neighborhoods, and this is one thing the design team has kind of discussed, and I think possibly could have gotten caught up in this issue, and that's why the drainage structures ended up there. But one of the things the neighborhood has asked is that the current green space that Brad showed in that aerial be as preserved as much as possible in that location, because they use it as their own little neighborhood playground. That's the t-ball field, the stickball field right behind the fire station there. And we tried to limit, even though it looks like there's a lot of it, that we tried to limit how much infrastructure that was there in those fenced off areas. So I think one of the things we talked about as a design team is those 3 trees may go away so we can give them more open space there and give that back to the neighborhood.
Okay. Thank you. I'm just going to draw attention to, hopefully I'm going to try to use the annotate feature. Well, it's kind of,
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, sort
There's
of.
a line.
There's
I
2
see it.
parking spaces to the bottom of that line. And I'm just thinking a bit about how if you're parking in that lot and you're going to go to the old fire station, you have to walk down the drive aisle and walk around the green space instead of having a sidewalk that connects that lot to the entrance to the historic building. And I'll try drawing another line here, like through there. So it seems to me, rather than having to go down and then through these handicap parking spaces to get inside. Sorry, I should have a different draw feature here, but anyway, I think hopefully you can see what I'm trying to, my point is in that having that green space and what's it like for a pedestrian who's parking in that lot, who's going to go to that historic structure for, it maybe the use has changed, but the last I understood that could be a community meeting space as well as some training space for the fire department.
I mean, that seems like a great point. I think we can look at that.
And then it relates to my question about the number of parking spaces. In the plans that were sent, I counted that there were 42 existing spaces that were being removed by the addition or the new station, but you proposed 49 new ones, including the ones dedicated just to the fire department. So
Brad, is that the right count? I know you guys did a count.
Yeah,
Yep.
maybe.
The new total will be 54 as currently shown. So there would be a net gain of 12 spaces there.
All right. So Jeff, you may remember I'm the chair of the Master Plan Implementation Committee, and I do appreciate the space next to the historic building having some. Now there's far more space between the parking spaces and the building. So I appreciate the changes that you made there. But we did also talk about how you arrived at building more parking spaces than what you were removing. We had some discussions at the committee level about parking, and the staff did some inventory of parking. And the reason I bring it up is those 2 spaces, or 3 even, right there at that entrance. And then even if I look at the plan, you talked about the green space on Walnut Street, and you've taken the parking absolutely as far as you can take it to Walnut Street. And I'm just wondering how you arrived in at 54 spaces.
Well, it sort of came to be probably before Brad and the civil engineering team kind of got started, because it really came down to a discussion with the committee at the beginning of the project. And the long story is that there are many different design options that were created for the station. There was a tug of war between where the building wanted to go and the amount of space we were taking from the green space over to the left. As you had mentioned, taking down too many trees, all that sort of thing. So we're trying to keep the building hugging the interior of the site. The initial concepts had no parking behind the fire station. So all of the parking for firefighters were going to be in that lot on the right-hand side. And so we wanted to maximize the size of that lot because of that need that all the firefighters that now parked kind of haphazardly around the headquarters building would then all be sort of all in one spot with all other town employees, residents, that sort of thing. Since that time, they adjusted what they needed behind the station for vehicle operations and training, and we're able to put parking over there. So the majority of firefighters are actually going to park in that particular lot. And so this lot on the right is going to be majority town employee and public parking. So one of the thoughts that I think the committee had was that it would be good to basically return to the town that additional parking and sort of say, like, here, we're doing something good. We're providing more parking in the town center. So that was the ultimate goal. We kind of left it the way it was, trying to maximize the parking availability. And I know, as you said, we did modify the southern part of the development so that it necked it down, and there's, less hardscape on that side than there was previously, but we didn't really touch the parking lot side.
Yeah,
so that's a long story, but that's where it
okay.
came from.
So I guess my comment would be like those, now I have a better handle on this draw too, those 3 spots. But I also wonder, with green all along here, and parking all along here, how is access to this building provided? You have to wait for the parking lot to be empty. And then the other space that I was questioning is, it was probably that one. So if there was no concerted effort outside of internal discussions about this number of parking spaces, the planning board members, I would like for us to discuss giving some feedback to the select board on
what?
these additional spaces.
On what? That it's too many, or it's too little, or what?
That I think it's too many, in part because of what I talked about here. They have bollards right next to the historic building because cars will be right up next to it, and it seems to me since they're offering, or they're providing more spaces than what they're removing, that this building ought to not be so crowded here, and that consideration should be given to how they're going to access this building at a minimum.
Yeah, we did talk about the storage sheds over there, and that was a concern from the town because they house things they need access to. So I believe Bowler is proposing hardscape paving that would allow access to those sheds. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, flipping back to the site plan here. Yeah, we are providing concrete pavement in front of the existing building there.
Yeah.
And then we know that there's different bays that have different frequencies of use. So could be a combination of operationally, if it was a less frequently used bay, you could cone it off.
Well, what the town ultimately decided is that they were going to park town vehicles, basically sign those spots for staff use. They hadn't really come down and exactly said they are going to definitely put a sign there, but they assumed, probably rightly, that they would be the ones that would be parking, and they would be able to move their vehicles if access was needed, that it wouldn't necessarily be a resident there. So that piece has kind of been thought through a little bit by town, and that's what we were directed on that side. My other question, Cheryl, was about the master planning committee, and I'm assuming, because I think you said it, that you did a study on parking in that area and what the use pattern might be. And I'm curious if the results of that indicated that actually we don't need to provide these additional parking that there's no need, or is it the need is not here, it's in a different location, like
Oh, there's
somewhere else?
definitely a need at the library. I think Tim and Allison, and Tim's on this call, so maybe he can comment on the spreadsheet that they developed for it. You know, it's a little hard now because COVID has changed how many people are attending, or whether you can even have in-person meetings, and how many are happening at the same time. And the potential of that fire station, you know, to be used for community meetings would add another meeting room. So that could add, you know, more people in terms of how many meetings are happening at the same time. But as far as I understand, there wasn't necessarily identified a additional need of parking except related to the library. But Tim, is my recollection wrong with that?
I'm trying to go through my inbox and see if I can find that spreadsheet. I mean,
I know the library needs it, but I mean, I've been there for meetings, you know, when I was on the zoning board where all that parking was filled up. So, you know, between the zoning board having a meeting and the planning board having a meeting or somebody else having a meeting, it's been pretty easy to see that parking filled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've noticed the same thing, Kathleen. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate for the landscape. I would love to get rid of some of that parking because it could make such a nice impact on some green. But I also I've been to the town hall where I've just been astounded all the parking's gone.
Yeah, it
nearly
just seems to
gone.
me that the historic building, to have pavement right up to the edge of it, was
But
the
that's
way
paved
the fire
right up
station.
to the edge of it now.
Yeah, but it's going to have a different use now as a fire station. It's not really that purpose anymore. Anyway, that's my feedback.
Right.
I mean, others may not agree with me on it, but
I would completely agree with Cheryl. I think just especially in that corner, just if you even took out those two spaces right there that abut it, it would greatly improve, and then have a nice sidewalk that you can access and come in. And I
agree with that.
And I'm a member of the church next door, and really, you know, you do occasionally have big meetings that overlap. You have, you know, the gazebo concerts tend to be a real busy time there, but this is, you know, really increasing. I think even on the back, if you took off the two rear spots on both drives, it would really enhance Walnut Street as well. But just for consideration on that. So.
Well, you need those for the fire. I mean, the firemen need all that parking behind there.
The firefighters would probably park behind the fire station, but if you're talking about the spots on the right-hand side.
Yeah, maybe on the right-hand side, just those two, just taking out the two last ones would just give a nice green buffer to Walnut Street.
I don't disagree with you guys. I mean, honestly, if there was no screaming need for parking, I honestly agree that the old fire station would be much better sited with landscaper on it rather than a paving as close as it is. I think probably what we can do is take this back to the fire station building committee and ask them, you know, what they'd like to do if they want to talk to town a little bit more to see if the need's there or whatnot, and we can certainly modify it. I think, Brad, would you guys say it wouldn't be a hard change for you to make?
No.
Yeah.
So I do have, I just pulled up the survey results that we did. So what we asked department heads at town hall was, how many people in your department drive to work and park in the town hall lot prior to COVID? How many visitors would your department receive a typical day? Was there a time of day when visitors are more frequent? Are the meetings? And then there's some questions about meeting spaces. So of all the departments, clerk, accounting, treasurer, parks, assessing, select board, engineering, procurement, planning, inspection services, health department, technology, and the town-owned cars that are parked around town hall, there are 58 vehicles that are kind of coming into town hall on a daily basis and needing to park. And then, you know, visitors are kind of all over the map. But I mean, you know, 58 cars, you know, the health and inspectional services cars are kind of out for different portions of the day. The other town cars are out for different portions of the day. But that's how many, you know, give or take a handful we're looking at. So when I hear 54 spaces,
Jim, though, this doesn't count the parking that's on the side in front of Town Hall in that count.
Right, our counts are simply the project parameters.
so so Cheryl, those are visitor parking spaces. So for instance, on a tax day where the treasurer sees 500 people come through town hall, you're going to want to have those spaces.
All of the ones on the side and the front are used for
So
visitors?
the on the Engine Road side, the ones that are on the side are for those are not visitor spaces. But yeah, everything that's by the preschool and everything in front tends to be visitor spaces.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I still think the 2 spaces next to the building, I would recommend removing. Maybe you don't do the 2 towards Walnut Street as a result of that, but
I agree, Cheryl. That would make a difference.
yeah.
Yeah, and I don't want to sit here. I mean, I'm trying to be meticulous about this because I'm in town hall every day, and I don't want to hear it. But I think these have all been good comments. I think to the extent that the removal of parking spaces makes the circulation of the whole project and the whole town hall campus better, I think that's a valid trade-off to be considering, especially since with the location of the parking lot now, you're really you're out in the pavement until you get to the door, which was not necessarily the case on the other side where you could sort of land on some sidewalk, on the sort of the firehouse entrance side of town hall. So I think, the more you can sort of do stuff to improve the circulation, is going to be better. So I think there's probably a discussion to be had about, those spaces, but also I wouldn't go too overboard because we are, right at the skin of our teeth, as it were, on parking.
I had one other question that I didn't see on here, but I'm thinking of this is it's a National Historic District that this falls in, and relating to the other properties next door and to the town hall. What is your plan for lighting? Because I know that the church to the right and town hall share very similar historic lighting, and it would be really nice to have that continuity to continue that on site with the fire station too, some historic lighting.
I don't know if you have the lighting thing up there.
I do have the photometrics if you want me to go down to that one.
Okay, I don't know that the question's so much about photometrics. It's probably just like the look. So
the
the lighting
yeah.
fixtures that we're using are pretty minimal fixtures. In fact, there's not even very many of them in number. I believe, Peter, we're currently looking at bollard lights in the courtyard area between the buildings, a few of those along the pathway as well, from the senior center, and a few pole mounted lights in the parking lot. The building does not necessarily have architectural lighting on it. There's nothing sort of accenting the architecture, but obviously being a fire station, we want to make sure people can see the front door or see the trucks if they have an emergency in the night. So the signage is lit, but it's backlit. So it's not, bright letters shining at you. It's sort of a more subtle look. And that's pretty much the extent of it.
So when you're saying just minimal pole lighting, because I know the police station, there's similar, to some of our more significant buildings in town, buildings have consistent lighting.
Yeah, I imagine the parking lot needs lighting, right? So
yeah, there's pole lights in the parking lot.
And do you have the style?
The fixture cuts. I don't know if you can pull it up, how fast you can get it, Peter, but I can vamp for a while you look. I can tell you that they are not historic fixtures. They don't have historic profiles on them.
Would that be a possible change at this point, that you do something with a low light? I know that the church has, they're
I think,
censored.
Yeah, the first things we kind of looked at were, was there sort of a cohesive plan for this area? And that may be where Cheryl's headed, but there isn't yet in terms of a standard kind of what's happening here. So we took cues basically from the design of the headquarters building, just as you would sort of any architectural building, kind of fitting the lighting with what it's next to. And so that's why they're more contemporary looking. I don't think it's not unreasonable for us to be able to change that. I think it's pretty simple to do.
It would match town hall, because as if you drive in, if you drive through town, the driveways around town hall, something consistent with those lightings, it would be nice to sort of tie this whole area together.
It's so sad, Meredith. It's so sad, Meredith, to think of historic lighting when they tore down our H.H. Richardson building to put out this piece of junk.
The lighting in.
I'm gonna say I was hoping those light fixtures aren't the same vintage as the current town hall, because I'm not sure we want to be going that way.
Ooh, yeah.
No.
I would just also ask that you consider what the bollard light style architect, the design of that looks like as well. And I guess the one other thing that came up that I was thinking about in the master plan implementation committee discussions, we had one session that you folks weren't at where we had invited students to participate, because a lot of students come from Pierce Middle School, Milton High School, and they kind of come through this area. And they said that they come this way. Well, actually, it's probably through here now, but that this sort of, because Pierce is over, well, I'm sorry, you can't see me where I'm drawing. Let me try and draw again. The Pierce Middle School is off that way.
Right.
And, the library obviously is off this way. And they told us that they did come to the green space over here. And so if they're walking, they're coming down this way. And if they're going to go to the library, they're probably going to come across here. So I see, like you said, like this is now concrete here. I'm just wondering whether that should be considered to be sidewalk, like through here anyway, so that, I don't know, like, is there still some vehicle traffic from the fire station out this way? Just want to try and think about the safety of the kids walking through there.
Yeah, it's limited in that direction. The fire department would go that way if needed, if there was a call that direction made sense, which they do now. So it's not a big change, but there would not be as much traffic going that way, and certainly the public could not go that way. So
I've gone that way.
Well, the public is two-way though, right?
In the new design, it would not be able to go out that way. So just to kind of keep the neighborhood traffic and cut through sort of confined. So
I would say if it's just a line in the pavement there, that I'm not sure how that's effective that's going to be.
It's a line and a sign. Nobody's paying for gates at this point or chains. So nobody wants that to restrict so it's, honor system, I suppose. But
what do you think about, since you've already got pavement here, about this idea of sidewalk through here?
Yep. And there is no sidewalk on Walnut Street currently on this side of Walnut Street. And that we brought that up with the neighborhood, and they did not want a sidewalk on this side of Walnut Street.
But there's a sidewalk over here.
There's a sidewalk on the opposite side, but not on.
There's one on the other side. I'm looking on Google Earth.
Yeah, I mean, they would be coming up the street from this side. So whether they came up from here and decided to cross or walk down the street, I don't know.
My only point being, if we did put a sidewalk there, it wouldn't have a destination other than the curb.
But if they're walking anyway, I guess
sort of like
point,
this
Cheryl,
one, right? Yeah, I mean, like,
if they're doing it anyway, you might as well build the walkway so that they're actually being safe rather than walking through a parking lot.
Yeah, and the point was sort of leading to, if the walkway comes out to the curb, or should we then be building a crosswalk, which means a handicap tilt down, and then across the street to Walnut Street and building the other side of that handicap.
Well, what are you doing here?
That is same thing. It sort of it ends in the curb, and that's as far as it goes. And the idea was that was the extent of this project's contribution to connecting to the senior center,
Right.
and the town in the future, if they wanted to, would make that.
So I
in.
think you could take the same approach on the other side, that the
Yeah.
project's contribution would be that sidewalk.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was getting at. I felt like if everyone was comfortable that it ended in a curb, that's okay. So it gives them
that
some
works.
place to walk down.
Yep. That's great. Thank you.
Didn't want sidewalks, eh?
They did not, surprisingly. We were expecting it, but they did not.
It encourages strangers to walk through your town, so that's probably not, walk through your neighborhood.
Well,
Having
just recommend-
sidewalks.
I'd recommend, I mean, I don't live there, but if folks are walking through there, just because you don't build a sidewalk doesn't mean they're not going to walk through there.
Oh, yeah, my kids, when they went to Pierce, I would walk through there to go pick them up.
Yeah, so then what you
And the
have,
kids do it.
then what you have is you've got lawn that just ends up deteriorating over time, and it ends up making a pathway of its own, or you have you have people walking through cars and traffic, and so you can, just because you're not going to build it doesn't mean it's not going to come. So I would suggest somebody taking a look at that again.
That was good, Cheryl, that you had that focus group with the young people, because it's really good to know.
Yeah, there was something else that came out. It's not really related to this, but this whole idea of a crosswalk across Canton Ave to get to the library, and and the use of the space. They actually would like to see some seating areas for them to be able to use, like in that green space, that park. Again, not really part of this project, but there were we have notes from MAPC facilitated that meeting, so we can circulate those if you're interested.
It's really cool. If I could just go back briefly to the generator, those pictures at the beginning weren't as nice as this, in that it looked like they kind of were just sort of dropped in the back there. So will there be a little bit of landscaping around them or anything? I know you said they would have like a cedar fence around it, but
Yes, so those will have a cedar board fence. It should be high enough to block them. There's landscaping. We're only showing a strip of planting between that board fence and the new building in that very narrow area. I'm sorry, I would point with my cursor, but I'm not driving.
Here you
It's
go.
okay.
Yes, thank you. Yes, that's sort of the extent of the landscaping that we're showing right now. Thank you.
Wanted to get
Yeah,
on the annotation.
I don't know if it's possible to have it even on the other side for the parking area or on the Walnut side. I mean, I don't know what it seems like the entry is on the Walnut side, right? So you probably can't put a little bit of green around it, but
I mean, we could put a little bit of green around it wherever there's not a gate, probably,
Okay.
that would be
For
fine.
instance,
Yeah,
you can see what they planted over near the trash enclosure
Yeah.
there. You've got plantings
exactly.
wrapping it.
that
yeah,
kind of idea I think would make a difference.
Sure.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sounds
Thank
good,
you.
yeah.
Great. All right. Any other thoughts? Okay. Well, thank you all for your participation. That's got some good comments. And like I said, we'll take these back to the building committee and see which way they'd like to go.
Well, thank you very
Thank
much.
you,
I mean,
yes.
I like the design, and I like the fact that, you're saving the, the old building. It looks
Yeah.
great. Thank
Yeah.
you.
I
do
really
have a
like the
question.
solar, and I like all the windows. I think the neighbors' contribution was really interesting, and I really like it. It feels more open, and it's very nice.
Thanks.
I just have a question on just out of curiosity, the scope of the renovation of the historic building, is that still in the project?
Yeah,
Is
so
okay.
it's sort of two parts. The exterior is being restored, windows are being replaced. The roof is being replaced. There's going to be a whole new repointing of all the brickwork, really tightening up the envelope. One, I don't know how much you're familiar with construction and public construction for that matter, but there's things called bid alternates. So, it's in the scope now, but the town would have the option to change the scope of the work if the bids came in, crazy, ridiculous prices. And that one of them was actually suggested by the Historic District Commission to do the slate roof, because right now the scope includes asphalt roof. And so we have in that an alternate to upgrade to a slate roof. So instead of just taking the slate off and replacing with asphalt, it would be a full new slate roof, with the intention to match the coloring and texturing of the existing slate. And then the interior would only be renovated on the first floor. So what's currently fire station office and garage bay would be turned into a new meeting space for the town. And potentially, also used by the fire department, but available for meetings and everything like that. It would have a couple of new bathrooms, a lobby space, storage room, and a meeting space for about 30 people or so.
Is there any, sorry.
No, I was just going to say quickly, the upper floors are not being touched at this time, although we have planned the project with space available in the future. So we're not constricting the building too much. If those floors are done over and an elevator is needed, we've planned for space for an elevator so that can be done, as well as a new egress stair, because the current stair there's only one of them and it's a illegal staircase. So when it doesn't meet current code. So we need a brand new egress stair and a brand new elevator in the future. That's already been kind of coordinated with this project. So if the town chooses to renovate the upper floors in the future, you can do that.
Just was curious about the meeting space. Since we work with antiquated AV equipment in the current conference room we use at Town Hall, is there anything of that nature in the scope for that room?
Yeah, we have no antiquated AV. We're not doing that. No, it's going to be very similar to the room in the library, if you're familiar with that meeting space. We're actually not even going to do a projector because these days the prices of TVs have come down such that to do a motorized screen and a projector is actually more expensive than just a large format TV, and the connections are still, just as good and even better sometimes. So it'll be a large TV screen with some whiteboards, and then there'll be connectivity for presenters and that sort of thing, as well as lighting controls.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question? Sorry, Denny, before we move away from it. And I don't, this isn't, so I like the idea of that glass wall too. So my question it's not meaning it negatively against it, but typically glass walls are more costly in cooling and heating, but I don't know much about a garage. Is it being that it's a garage or that's where you're housing the vehicles? Is the thought that there wouldn't be that added cost?
Well, I can't lie to you. It is going to be a little bit more cost for the glass. The committee wrestled with that, and I think the ultimate trade-off was considering the tight constraints around the town office building and the vehicle circulation, everything that's going on back there, really having the visibility of the trucks and the fact that the fire station right there was paramount importance to them, and that's what they gravitated to and latched onto. We did go over the cost impact, and it's not nothing, but it's not a huge number. So they were comfortable with that in the overall project budget. The energy, there is some, obviously it's glass, it's insulated glass in this case, it's not just single pane, but the fire station garages aren't air conditioned. So you're not losing all this cooled air that you spent money to air condition. They're also minimally heated. So they're about 60, 65 degrees in the winter time, because you're just trying to keep it to some level of heat without, people don't have to live there, or their office isn't in that particular room. The rest of the station is definitely treated differently, which is why there's a lot less glass on the rest of the station. So the heat loss will happen, but you're not trying to get it to such a high temperature there.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, as long as, the the town understands the cost impact. That makes sense. And I'd imagine it's not going to be heavily tinted, so you'd get some gains from the lighting anyway, right?
That's true. You actually get a lot of wintertime solar heat gain, which helps to make the space a nicer space to work in.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Sure. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time this evening, and we'll see you soon.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Good night. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. All right. So now we have nomination of new members for the Open Space and Recreation Planning Committee and Master Plan Implementation Committee. So Kathleen.
I would nominate Meredith for the Open Space and Recreation Committee.
Any seconds? I'll second. All in favor? Kathleen O'Donnell,
Yes.
Rich Beeler,
Yes.
Cheryl Tagayas,
Yes.
and Meredith Hall,
Yes.
and Denny Swenson. Congratulations.
And thank you so much. I appreciate it. I really do. And you will be coming before the Community Preservation Committee
that'll
with your
be
open
great.
space needs.
Right. Great.
Wonderful. And Cheryl, would you like to tell us about the nomination for the
Yes.
master plan?
Liz Miller resigned from the committee due to personal time commitments. And she was a wonderful member, and thank her for her time and commitment. She had great ideas, and she'll be missed. However, we're happy to welcome someone new. There were 3 candidates that our committee reviewed, and we were looking at having someone who, we were trying to make sure we keep some diversity of demographic, if you will. So we were looking at someone with a young family, and that we felt was lacking with some of us whose kids are grown, and someone who lives in an area that we're going to be dedicated some planning to, and that's East Milton. And so Elaine Benson is being recommended by our committee. So we sent that recommendation to the select board and into our board, the planning board, for approval. Because the bodies that designate or appoint the members are our 2 boards, the select board and the planning board. So I would like to make a motion for the planning board to appoint Elaine Benson as a member of the Master Plan Implementation Committee.
I'd be happy to second that. I really like Elaine Benson a lot. She lives around the corner from me, and she's really very nice and very thoughtful person.
Wonderful. Okay, all in favor, Rich Beeler,
Yes. Sorry, I couldn't find the button.
that's right. Meredith Hall,
Yes.
Cheryl Tagayas,
Yes.
Kathleen O'Donnell,
Yes.
Denny Swenson, yes. Okay.
Great, thank you.
All right. And I wanted to invite Kevin Freitag in to talk to us about the process for our winter town meeting articles. Let's see, we need to invite him in as a panelist to.
He's in.
Oh, there he is. Good evening, Kevin Freitag. How do we bring
There he is.
Kevin? Oh, good. Good
Good evening,
evening.
everyone.
Nice to see
Hello.
you again. Hello. All right. So I thought you could sort of walk us through the process and sort of help us understand where we are with the accessory dwelling unit article.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Kevin Freitag, for those of you who haven't met me, it's nice to meet you, and it's good to see all of you who I know so well from previous planning board meetings again. I've been asked to speak with you briefly about the accessory dwelling unit article that has been submitted by the planning board to the select board. It's the article that was voted, I believe it was last Wednesday, by the planning board. As you may know, there have been some concerns that have been raised regarding the scope of that article and whether or not it exceeded the scope of the article as originally published and noticed before the public hearing. That's a process that takes place as required by Mass General Law. It's Chapter 48, Section 5. That section lays out the process for the public hearing and also provides that you have to have text, among other things, of the municipal zoning bylaw or a bylaw amendment that you're proposing available. And a article was available before the hearing. The issue is whether the article that was originally proposed and the article that eventually was approved by the planning board last Wednesday are so dissimilar that there is an issue regarding notice. So what I've done is I've spoken with your planning director, Tim Zawinski, and Tim was able to send me actually a red line version that showed the differences between the two. And I've also had the opportunity to sort of go back and read through them again. And it is my opinion that the article that was approved by the planning board last week is in fact outside the scope of what was put into the notice before the public hearing. I can give two specific examples of that. And then I won't go any farther down the road because I think it's pretty apparent just from those that the issue exists. The first is that there is a section that was proposed by the planning board last week to delete section 3, subsection B, paragraph 1F of the existing zoning bylaw. That deletion was not mentioned at all in the notice that was provided before the public hearing. So that issue alone, I think, is one that is clear and one that clearly exceeds the scope of what was initially noticed. And then going through the rest of the bylaw that was voted by the article that was proposed and voted by the planning board last week, there are sort of two things that are striking. First, generally speaking, when changes are made to a proposed bylaw or a noticed bylaw that is new or an amendment to an existing bylaw, which are more restrictive in nature than the bylaw as originally provided at the beginning of the public hearing, those restrictions, if they are greater, for instance, moving from an accessory dwelling unit, which is allowed as a matter of right, to one which is only allowed by special permit, that being more restrictive, that type of change is generally considered to be outside of the scope of what was in the original notice. And so there's a few instances of that, I think, throughout the bylaw that was proposed by the planning board last week. And in addition, there's just I think, holistically, there's quite a bit that is different. And I'm not suggesting that the planning board during a public hearing process can't tweak or clarify or rearrange or reword sections of a proposed zoning bylaw or amendment, but there is some point where the cumulative effect pushes it over the line, I would suggest. And I can't tell you that there's one specific clear line that can be applied, but at some point along the way, it does, if enough changes are made, I think that it is fair to suggest that the article is different. I think we deal with this quite a bit. For those of you who are familiar with town meeting, we deal with this quite often at town meeting where amendments are proposed on the floor and there's a question about whether they're within the scope. This is a similar type concept. It's, town meeting has one set of rules. This notice provision in section 48, chapter 48, section 5 has its own set of rules, but there are some similarities, and it really comes down to notice. And the issue was really whether or not the residents who had picked up the notice of a hearing would not be surprised by what was eventually sort of proposed by the planning board at the end of the public hearing. They would have anticipated they should have been able to anticipate what was proposed by the planning board at the end of the public hearing based on what was provided in notice. And I just find that in this case that test is not met. So I think that there's an issue regarding the viability of this article at this point. The good news is it is not a a problem that is unfixable. The way to fix this issue, which is a process issue, is I would suggest to have another public hearing. Notwithstanding the fact that that's not an easy process for any board to undertake, it is one that would address this issue. It would, I think the process and the sequence would be to take the article as proposed by the planning board last week and provide that as notice for a public hearing. Obviously, quite a bit of work, it seems to me, has gone into this article at this point, and this version is such that were it to be presented in by way of notice before a public hearing, I think you would satisfy the requirements. In my opinion, you would satisfy the requirements of 48 Section 5. And what that would do for you is then at town meeting, you would not be subjected to objections to this article based on process. And you could instead perhaps focus on, other challenges that might be made to the article on substance. But the process piece would be resolved. And I think that that's quite critical. This was something that was discussed at the select board last night. The select board discussed briefly last night the fact that you may be aware that obviously we've had, I think, 6 remote town meetings over the past 2 years. That option is no longer available to the town or any town in Massachusetts as of December 15th of 2021. Presently, town meeting is scheduled for February 28th. And given the current circumstances, the select board last night was considering perhaps delaying the town meeting by 2 weeks from the 28th of February to March 15th, I believe, in order to perhaps address some concerns regarding meeting, having town meeting meet in person, essentially giving a bit more time to see sort of where things go in the next 6 to 8 weeks with the pandemic and hopefully getting to a point where people would feel more comfortable meeting in person. So what that might provide is an opportunity for your board to have a public hearing which would conclude before the warrant went out to print for that meeting if it were to be held on March 15th. So that would allow you to have a public hearing, then be in a position to close your hearing, revote an article, submit it to the warrant before the warrant was going to go out to print. And that way, and hopefully also get back before the warrant committee at the same time, or at least continue, because I know the warrant committee has seen this version of the article already, but it would allow for a more complete warrant that would have an article that had been through the necessary notice and hearing process, and then also was accompanied by a complete recommendation of the warrant committee, and would be ready for town meeting and not susceptible, in my opinion, to, at least on these grounds, to a process challenge. So that was discussed in part last night. I think that the way it was left with the select board last night was that they wanted to take sort of a wait and see position to give this board an opportunity to meet and discuss sort of how it wanted to proceed, and that the select board may meet as soon as next week to respond given what this board decides to do. So I think there are a couple things that the board needs to consider tonight. First, I think that you very seriously need to consider either withdrawing the ADU article from the warrant for this February town meeting, or going back out and having a public hearing with the idea that the select board would accommodate such a public hearing and would consider moving this town meeting to the 15th. But even if it didn't move it to the 15th, you would still correct any defects in the process regarding this particular bylaw amendment by doing that public hearing. So it would, that public hearing would not be a waste. It's something, in my opinion, that needs to be completed in order for this bylaw amendment to move forward. So you could have that public hearing quickly and see if the select board accommodates the the hearing and pushes this off to March 15th. If they don't, you could ask the select board to remove the article from that warrant and have your hearing either quickly or perhaps in a less quick fashion, perhaps, not in the next couple of weeks, but in the next month, with an eye towards perhaps submitting the article for the annual town meeting. So those are the options as I see them. And I'm happy to answer any questions about anything I've just said or any other, try to address any other comments that your board members may have.
I just had a quick question. So Kevin, but the moving the meeting to the 15th of March isn't for this particular reason. They're thinking that people won't show if it has to be in public, in person, in February.
That's right. So the way that this got started was that the town moderator had proposed a letter to recommend a remote town meeting, which is the process that was required by the special act in order to have a remote town meeting. That's the first step. And in doing so, we reviewed the statute and realized that that's no longer an option. So the select board was considering different options, including pushing back the meeting by perhaps 2 weeks. And at the same time, this issue with the planning board was sort of also developing. And so it seemed like there may be an opportunity to kill two birds with one stone, pardon the expression, and essentially maybe accommodate one another here and get your article before town meeting at that March 15th date, having gone back out and had a hearing, a public hearing on this revised article.
Okay. I mean, I just didn't want it to make it sound as if they were going to change the entire date of town meeting just over this ADU article. It's really over.
No, that's right. And again, I don't want to speak for the select board. I'm not here to speak on their behalf. Their meeting was well attended last night. Your chair was there. And they're considering a number of different things, which is why I'm suggesting that they may stick with the February 28th date, even if this board decides, which I think it needs to do, to have a public hearing on this. They might stick with the February 28th date, in which case this board's course of action might simply be to say, well, that's fine. We'll withdraw the ADU article from the March meeting. We'll have our public hearing and we'll put it onto the annual town meeting.
Or wait for the fall or something. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. Well, I would move to have a public hearing again on the ADU bylaw.
Okay, well, I wanted more public process, so I guess we should open it up for discussion. I guess I was
first.
Yeah. Okay, Cheryl,
did you do it, Denny?
You got to it first, so I'll let you have it. All right, let's discuss.
I guess I would just say, since this is a technical, I would view it as technical in nature, relative to my my views last week in terms of wanting to move this forward. So I'd like to resolve the issues that Kevin raised or town council has raised, and keep this moving. And if it ends up having to move to May, then that's what it'll have to do. But if it can happen in March, then I think I would definitely like to see it happen in March.
Well, I welcome a public hearing. I think zoning is very hard, and I think it is actually good that our draft was a working draft and we were evolving, and I felt like we were making improvements. So I guess my learning was that some of our instincts were right, that it's good to just involve the public more and have more public meetings at times like that. So I'm looking forward to hearing from the public. I just it's a little bit tricky, and maybe I can ask Mr. Freitag a question. I think the public was feeling left out because I think they could sense there was a lot of versions going on. There was a lot happening. and we were in a hurry. And I do want to have a public hearing. I just want the public to feel as though we're having a public hearing to hear them and not just check the boxes. If they make suggestions, are we not to take any suggestions because we're so late in the process? Or is this like a standard public hearing that we have, at any time? The public hearing is to hear from the public and to try to include them in the process. So
I think that's where we got into trouble the last time. I mean, that issue about taking out, changing the bylaw with the temporary apartments was a suggestion made by Alex at the last minute, and I put it in. So I don't want to be in the same situation where we've posted the version that we have and then have a public hearing and have like constant tweaking on it. I mean, I think
I'm not suggesting constant tweaking, but I just don't, I just kind of, well,
I think it's our obligation to listen to the public, and if there's
That's true.
information
I'm
that
not
we think
saying
would
I'm
make
not
it
saying
better,
that
we can change it. So it's,
Yeah.
but obviously, well, depending on what the information, if there's new things that we've learned, if it's more of the same things that we've heard, then maybe we, there's nothing to act on. But if there is something to act on, I think we have to be open-minded to that as well.
And so I just don't want to be in the position that
Right.
we're putting town council in the position once again of saying, wait a minute, you posted something and you submitted something and now you've got something that's, yellow instead of blue. And so I don't want to be in that
I get it.
situation.
Yeah, I think we have, I mean, we've talked about this before. We have received actually a lot of input, and there's just maybe a lack of awareness for some in the public about it. So advertising it again, will at least have people become aware of it. But I think a lot of the things that we've discussed are going to be some of the same issues. And, it's really a matter of whether a majority of town meeting agrees or not, right? But that's, or a majority of residents, and convey it to their elected town meeting members, if they agree, because it's really, differences of whether people think it's a good idea or not, right? Some of these things, and people have different opinions about that. And the more you talk about it, it's not going to change the fact that there's a difference between doing it by special permit and doing it as of right? So, some people just need to understand what's currently in the bylaw and how this would change it. And I agree, having another public hearing, it will give people more notice and they can learn more about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it should, I'd rather not see it delayed too long, because I do think that oftentimes it's right before town meeting that at least many people become aware of zoning initiatives. Even as we work on them for a very long time, it doesn't seem to percolate to people's radar screen.
That's really true.
So that's my experience anyway.
Okay, Rich, did you have any thoughts before we finalize our vote?
No, nothing that's hasn't already been said. I mean, I'm for putting a time together, soon to do the public process, and hopefully, if things do get extended, we can get it in before, and if not, it gets pushed the next time around. But yeah, I like the idea.
Okay. All right, we'll finish this motion, then we'll look at the dates. Okay, so all in favor for a new public hearing on the accessory dwelling unit article, a new public hearing for that. Okay, Cheryl Tagayas.
Sorry, Denny, I was trying to ask a question.
Sure. Oh, sorry.
I was muted. Sorry, it's not your fault. Did Kathleen say as soon as possible in her motion? Because Kevin did, I think, give two suggestions. One could be as soon as possible. One could be not rushed. So Kathleen,
Yeah,
Would
Do you
would
want
would
you
say as
accept
soon
a
as
friendly
possible.
amendment as
Yeah.
soon as possible? Okay, all right,
Yeah.
thanks.
Okay. Okay, well, I mean, I was gonna look at a date in February based on, okay, so here's before, because maybe we'll put a date in it if you'd like. So Monday's a holiday, so if Tim got the ad in on, say, the 18th, we could have the meeting on, say, the 3rd, February 3rd, because you have to post it for 2 weeks, Tim, is that right?
That's correct.
So does that work? Are you looking at your calendar too?
Yep.
That works.
Okay, so
Okay.
February 3rd. All right, so do you want to include that in your motion?
So yes, so I would make a motion to hold a public hearing on the accessory dwelling unit bylaw on February 3rd at 7 o'clock.
Okay, should
And
we
I
say
still second
7:05?
that.
7:15.
So is February, I'm sorry, I have questions now. Uh, is February 3rd the soonest we could do it?
Yeah, because it has to be
Um,
advertised.
Has to post for 2 weeks. And we
Okay.
have a holiday Monday, so.
No, it's
uh,
fine. I'm on a 10-hour flight on the 3rd, so I won't be.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, Rich.
Well, so how about the 7th? Do we have to have a Thursday?
It doesn't, do you want to do? What looks good for you, Rich?
It's just a bit, so we'll have to work around, you don't have to work around me totally. So I'm going to California via a couple stops on the 3rd. I'm flying home that Sunday, flying to Tennessee on Monday,
Oh,
and
God.
flying home on Thursday. And so as long as I'm not in a flight in the air, I can be on a call.
Well, should we just do it on the 10th? Would that be adequate time for the select board, Tim?
So what I'll, and again, not speaking for the select board, my understanding is that if town meeting does get pushed to a March 15th date, we're just talking about, pushing everything 2 weeks forward. They had intended to finalize the warrant. I believe that they had intended to finalize the warrant and get it out to the printer at their meeting on the 26th. To get to the printer on the 27th. So if we're just pushing the schedule out 2 weeks, that means that their meeting on the 9th would be when that would happen. So it is something that kind of needs to get done, I think, before the 9th. So I think the 8th would probably be the last day that you can hold a public
That would
hearing.
work for me. I'm not on a plane.
You're on the ground somewhere.
I'm in Tennessee.
Okay, Tennessee.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
As long as the world
Kathleen.
doesn't shut down and, COVID stops all my travel.
All right.
Well, I called into that, I zoomed into the last town meeting from the Rhine. It was 4 o'clock in the morning before the town meeting finally stopped. It was
Oh, boy.
horrible. I'm really happy because in July I'm sailing to Newfoundland and you won't be able to reach me at all.
There you go.
All right, so February 8th. So I would make a motion to have a public hearing on the ADU bylaw on February 8th at 7:15.
And I still second that.
Okay. All in favor? Rich Beeler,
Yes.
Meredith Hall,
Yes.
Cheryl Tagayas,
Yes?
Kathleen O'Donnell,
Yes.
Denny Swenson, yes. Okay. In addition to that, we did receive a citizen article from Alex Whiteside. I know it's only been in the last couple of days, but it's something that we've talked about quite a bit because of talking about the accessory dwelling unit article. It's going for the May warrant, but where we're having a public hearing on this, and it would probably be the same people that would be interested, I thought maybe we should have the public hearing on the citizen article on the same night, just to, not have the people have to come to two different meetings for the same topic area.
I would suggest that that's not a good idea. It's too confusing.
Well, it actually
and-
would help clear up confusion because we could,
Well,
Yeah.
we could just, everybody's entitled to their opinion. My opinion is that it's too confusing. And I also wonder why we would have a public hearing on a citizen's petition at all. If it's a citizen's petitioned article, I don't think that goes through the planning board. It goes by citizen's petition to the warrant.
okay.
That's a question for town council, not for,
That's a good question.
But if it's a citizen's petition, I don't see how it has any, I don't see how the planning board has a role in it.
Okay, well, maybe it's not a public hearing, but maybe it could be next on the agenda. And we could talk about that. So we could just have a quick comparison and understand any relationship or any cross thoughts, because it's the same topic area. So it's not a public hearing on a citizen article. Maybe it's just an agenda item.
I can provide a little bit of guidance on that for the board.
Thank you.
So under 40A, there are a number of different ways that a zoning bylaw amendment can reach town meeting. The planning board is certainly a point of origination for, that's one avenue, but also 10 registered voters. This actually refers to, 10 by request of registered voters of a town. There's a way for them to do it as well. So the citizens petition would set it up in such a way that it typically would go to the select board by way of a citizens petition to amend the zoning bylaw. And then the select board would have 14 days to submit it back to the planning board. And then the planning board would have 65 days rather, to hold a public hearing. So even though it is a citizens petition, which ordinarily goes right to town meeting, since we're dealing with a zoning bylaw amendment, you would, as the planning board, be required to hold a public hearing on it. The statute actually requires the planning board to hold a public hearing.
If it's sent to us by the select board.
Correct, and it has to be. There's no, these are all shalls in the statute. So it's submitted to the select board, then it shall be submitted within 14 days of planning, and then it shall be scheduled for a public hearing within 65 days with notices required by the statute.
So it would be
since
too
it hasn't been
soon
submitted,
to do it on February 8th.
Well, no, they received it yesterday, so.
But they haven't sent it to us.
But they will within 14 days.
But so that won't give us enough time to advertise for the February 8th.
I'm not so sure that the 14 days, I think that's the outside deadline on that. I think that the select board could send it to you earlier than that. I can speak to the select board about that.
But I think Kathleen's question is, if it would have to be sent to us within the next couple of days, right?
Guys, I'm just trying to make it convenient for the public. That's all. I just want to make this convenient for the public so they don't have to come to two meetings on the same topic. They can just
I
come to
think
one meeting.
everybody has said that they'd like to hear more about this. And so the more
Oh,
times
good. I'm
that people
glad.
can talk about it, the better.
Great. Okay, so.
That's the
All right.
complaints I've heard, is that people haven't had enough opportunities. So now they would, they'd have two.
Great. Okay, all right, so I think the select board will be sending that to us. I can contact the select board. And I think I could work with Tim if everyone would be comfortable to have that on the same night. I think we can pull it up. But
I think, I mean, we've given Mr. Whiteside quite a lot of time on this, actually more than even our own fellow elected planning board member, particularly at the last meeting where she was asked to limit her time to 7 minutes. And I feel as if if there's a lot of interest in discussing this, we should stay focused on the article that we voted. And I'm fine having a separate hearing for the citizens petition. But I do feel we've shortchanged the discussion of purely the language that's in the article that we voted.
So I think that there were something like 15 citizens that signed the citizen article. I understand it was Alex that delivered it, but I think, and I recognize some of his language, so I'm sure he had a part in it. But I think there were other citizens on that petition. So I would like them to be considered as well.
I will not accept it as a friendly amendment to my motion. Rich has his hand up though.
Well, I don't, I mean,
Okay,
we wouldn't.
I thought we finished that. Like, we're going to have a public hearing on your article. That's a given, and that's a completely done. This is
On
a
the
new
8th.
discussion. This is a whole new discussion. That's done. That's going to happen at 7:15. I'm proposing that we have also on that night's agenda a public hearing on the citizen article that is of similar nature.
So can I ask a question?
Yes.
So actually, right, it's for Kevin. So I guess my question is, can we vote on something that isn't in front of us or voted by the select board and put it on our agenda? And secondly, and I'm sure the answer is yes, but I guess then what would be the opinion of Kevin? What would be the opinion of town council in doing both on the same night? Like, so my worry before you answer the question is, the worry is, do we have the time in one night? Because I feel like it's been really tough to go through two at once, but maybe we can do it if we start right off. I guess, so my question is, can we vote to set up a public hearing on an article that's not before us at this point? I don't know if we have to wait. And then secondly, can we do them both at the same time?
So I think that you could take a preliminary vote to do that, to anticipate that the select board is going to send this to you, because I think that probably that 14-day period is there to provide for the select board, especially in the case of the 10 registered voter requirement, to confirm that the individuals that have cited are 10 registered citizens of Milton. I think that that's probably why, and also just to accommodate a select board's regular meeting schedule. It gives them some time. So I think that you could anticipate that the next time that the select board meets, maybe that's going to be early next week, that they would at that time send this to the planning board. I don't think that, again, I don't want to speak for the select board, but I don't think that they have any reason to delay, and that seems to be what the statute is intended, subject of course to the clerk doing her work and determining that that the article passes muster and has been signed by enough individuals to satisfy the requirements of the statute. So you could take, I think, a vote tonight to say if the select board does do that at its next meeting, then we would put this on for public hearing on such and such a date.
Evan, does that sending need to happen via, does the select board need to vote formally, like, okay, we've got this in our hands, we are referring this to the planning board, yay or nay? I mean, we have it. I got it from the town administrator. It's not like we don't have the thing, but like, does the select board need to affirmatively choose via a vote to send it to the planning board?
The language of the statute is submitted to the planning board for review. And anytime I think of a public body taking action, I think that it has to do so in a public meeting pursuant to a vote. So I would say that it does. I think that it's unusual for, I mean, I certainly have heard of zoning amendments by citizens petition in other municipalities. I don't know that I've dealt with one in Milton specifically, but I see no reason why the select board just wouldn't follow sort of the ordinary course of what this statute provides, which is just to submit it to the planning board. So again, so long as it passes muster.
And I know I had a second part of that, but let me just want to state this part first for the rest of the board. So I'm not looking to, I don't want to disrupt the process. So if somebody is submitting it and it's going through the proper channels, I mean, we have to do our due diligence and have a public hearing. What I don't want to see happen though, is if we do it the same night, and Kevin, I guess there's still a question out there is what your thoughts on that are. If the answer is yes, you can do it the same night and that makes sense, I do not want to do them in tandem like we did last time. It was very confusing for myself. I'd rather open up a public hearing, have it complete, then open up the next public hearing and have it complete. I do not want to sit on it. I don't want to sit between them and say this one says this and that one says this. We're going to go nowhere fast. So I don't want to be a part of a public hearing that does that.
They would have to be separate public hearings.
There would
and
be
I-
separate public hearings,
Okay,
separate
good.
agenda items. Could be separate.
And, you know,
Then this was the better
honestly-
process then. I think this was, maybe this is what should have happened like months ago then, because this maybe is going to be cleaner.
You know, one
Sorry.
of the reasons, one of the reasons this got pushed so long is we've always had a lot on the agenda and it's been pushed to the end of most meetings. And I really feel as if we should dedicate a meeting to this article. It's the right thing to do. It's better for the public, and we can consider the other citizens petition at its own public hearing. I think it's far less confusing. If it's confusing for us and for Rich, imagine the public, you know? So I just really feel, I know what it takes to work on these. I respect the work that Kathleen's done, a lot of work trying to take into consideration comments, and then oftentimes only to have like a few minutes because we're out of time. I just really feel as though it's our job to be respectful and to schedule these things. There's no rush on that one. We don't have it in our hands officially, and there's no reason we can't schedule it at a separate night, in my view.
The reason for scheduling it would be a consideration for the public that has an interest in the topic, not having them have to come to two separate meetings. So it's just about being considerate of the citizens. And we have had a little bit of a rough process, and we have had a lot of feedback from the citizens that they've been unhappy with the way this
Some
has gone.
citizens have been unhappy. Not every citizen has been.
No, not every
unhappy.
citizen. No, I would never say every citizen, thank heavens.
But I think
Right.
Rich is right. Is that it's confusing enough to sort of deal with this at one meeting.
But we're gonna have
let-
to deal with both articles. So I
Well,
think
but
it's good
two
to
separate
get
town
them all.
meetings. The ADU
Well-
would be coming before the spring, the spring one, maybe in March, maybe in February, and the other one is on the annual in the spring.
Sooner or
So
later,
they're
we're gonna
not on
have
the
to
same-
explain both articles. Sooner or later, we're gonna have to explain both articles. It's the same
But then-
topic area. It's the people. I just think it's if you're sensitive to the people, if you're sensitive to the citizens, and that's the way I feel. So perhaps we should.
I think we should just take a vote.
I will point out that we've had some citizens sit through discussions on our agenda until 11 p.m. so they could comment on the memory care zoning, for example.
No, I
So,
know.
I mean, our agendas have run really long, and I think it's not too much to ask that we dedicate separate nights to these two different articles.
Can you, I'm sorry, Kathleen, what you just said, that there'd be separate town meetings. I mean, if they put it through quick, then it would potentially be,
No. The warrant for the spring meeting
Oh,
is already
so it's not
closed.
possible.
So no, he submitted it for the annual meeting.
Oh,
At
I'm
least that's what
sorry.
his memo said.
Okay, I'm
So
sorry, I didn't see it.
He submitted it for the annual meeting, and we have this one for the special spring.
So once the select board gives us this article, Rich, we have to have a public hearing on it within 60 whatever days. So we're gonna have to have a public hearing sooner
No,
or later.
understood.
It's gonna be
Yep.
on this topic. It's just a matter of, are we gonna be, it's just a consideration to the public that is probably gonna be confused about, well, what's that article and how do you tell the difference? And we're gonna have to vote on one in the March meeting. We're gonna have to vote on the other one in the May meeting. And we're gonna have to clear up that confusion at some point. We're gonna have to talk about both of these articles at some point. I think it would just be considerate for this public if we did it
It's
In one night.
10, it's 10 o'clock. So
Okay.
I think we should
Okay.
just take a vote on saying, whether, you want to make your motion about when you want to have the public hearing on the citizens petition, and we would take a vote on it.
I just don't know why we have to rush this vote. I mean, it doesn't seem. I mean, well, let me ask you this. So
Yeah.
here's my issue.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm available that day. The reality is I'm not really available. I'm going to skip a bunch of meetings to make this public hearing. But I can already tell you I'm not able to stay on the call till 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. I just can't. I have work that whole time while I'm away. So, I mean, my suggestion was going to be, like, while you folks were talking, I was thinking, why not have them on back to back, one night, one the next night. My only issue with that is if I do join a public hearing on that date, I mean, I'm on a plane the next day, so I'm traveling a ton. So I don't know what to do. I don't know that I can vote. I'm all for having the open meeting because, again, I'm not interested in stopping a citizen's petition. They've asked, they have the right to do it. They have, there's a process. Sounds great. We have done multiple public meetings in one day. That sounds great. My only issue is I'm traveling for like 10 days straight, and I don't have a lot of time. And I'm sorry, like.
No.
So I
Richard.
just might not be able to be there.
Okay. Well, we want you there for the public hearing. So I guess I'm reading the tea leaves that.
I'm so like,
No,
I'm really
no,
trying.
No, I know you are.
Yeah. Like,
No, I know, and I appreciate you were willing to meet while you were traveling. And I don't want to take too much of
You
your
might
night
hear
out.
country music in the background if I'm in Tennessee. So just to
There you
say.
go.
That's
I
good.
promise I won't have a
question.
drink first, though.
Sorry. I just
Go
have a
ahead.
question because
Yeah.
we're going to we really need to talk about 440 Granite at some, we have an extension, but
Mhm.
we're limited in time. So I just want to make sure that we're really saving some good discussion time for on that topic. So we're starting to fill up our calendar and
I know, because we have Dodson and Flinker on February 7th, right?
Yeah.
Or is that March 7th? No, it's February 7th, right?
That's what you meant, Cheryl, by never having enough time at the end of meetings to.
Right, and then February 8th, okay. And we're keeping Kevin Freitag, so let's let him go. But, okay, so, well,
Except I just have one quick question for Kevin. Did you send the CPA article to Katie? Your version? She had mine.
I will, yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
okay. All right, so I'll just make the motion. No, I'll just accept that Rich can't do it and Kathleen and Cheryl don't want to do it. And I'll just have it on a meeting, but
Well,
I'll just have it the very next
the process the process will follow the process, and we'll get the referral from the select board, and we'll set up a public hearing for it as soon as we get the information we get the referral from the select board. I mean, we're not saying we're not going to do it.
No, I'll
It's
just
they're
have
not
it at
gonna
the
do
very
it the
next
same
meeting.
day.
I'll just have it at the
that
very
works.
next meeting.
I'll have the next meeting that we're going to have, I will be at it.
Okay, so
Okay.
we'll have it at the very next meeting, and I'll just work on the posting with Tim, so it's 2 weeks out.
Do we have any issue with, since town meeting can't be has to be in person moving forward? Do our meetings now have to be in person?
no.
That hasn't been affected yet.
Okay.
Now, the open meeting law, for whatever reason, the legislature decided they let the open meeting law for public bodies permit remote meetings until April 1st of 2022, but the town meeting for the representative town meeting for closed town meeting like Milton has was only provided for until December 15th of 2021.
Interesting. The meeting that has the most people in it.
Mhm.
The one that's the least safe for COVID. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, wait.
Sorry, did we say the 7th was the Flinker Dodson?
Yeah.
16th.
Sorry.
What did we say,
No, we
Tim?
didn't.
16th.
Okay, I had the wrong date in
Yeah,
my calendar.
okay, so I thought, okay,
Okay. All right.
No,
Okay,
we said
so,
the
16th, right? That's
16th.
what 16th.
okay, 16th.
Sorry.
Okay. And then we said the 8th for our
The ADU.
ADU public hearing. All right, and then we are moving on. Okay,
We also
thank
have a
you.
regular- We have a meeting on the 10th too.
Well, maybe we shouldn't have the meeting on the 10th, but I think we can say goodnight to Kevin Freitag because he doesn't need to hear. But you
Thank
Good
you,
night,
Kevin.
everyone.
so
Good to
much.
see you
Thank
all
you.
again. Stay
Thank you.
safe.
Thanks,
All right,
Kevin.
be well. Thank you. All right, so let's look at our schedule because we have too many meetings and I already broke my New Year's resolution. Okay,
What's on the
Which
10th?
was?
Potentially.
which was
What
to
was
not
it?
have this many meetings in a month. This is going
Mhm.
crazy. I lost it. It's only February. Oh my God. Okay, so
At least you
8th
didn't need
and
a chocolate
16th.
cake or something like that. So yeah, break that New Year's resolution.
Well, wait till after this meeting. That's when I eat my cake. I should drink whiskey, but I drink
No, it's a
ate
dry
cake.
January. You can't.
I don't think we have anything slotted for the 10th. We did get a scenic road application, but I think that we can. I'll talk to the applicant about that. So we do have to hold a hearing on that within 21
21
days.
days.
We can't do it on the 27th, could we? February, January 27th?
No, because that's got to be advertised for 2 weeks.
Well,
Well,
maybe
does
we
it
can,
seem- Sorry, Danny, go ahead.
when we advertise the citizen article, maybe we can, well, no, we don't want to do two public hearing. Oh my God. All right. All right, we'll put our heads together tomorrow, Tim.
Yeah, and like I said, I'll talk to the applicant and kind of see if we can come to an agreement about maybe a later February hearing.
Yeah.
I'll
'Cause-
give you a preview of coming attractions. This is the therapy, the sort of the medical healthcare facility on Brush Hill Road down by Fuller Village. Take a drive down there and you'll see some trees that have already been cut down and walls that have already been.
Oh, the old Columban Fathers?
Yeah,
building?
sure. Yeah.
Right at the corner.
So
At
this
the
is one, this is one where the work has already been done and it's a whoops, let's go ask the planning board for forgiveness. So we won't be holding them up on work that they wanted to do. They've already done it. So maybe you guys can take a little more time to figure out how we're gonna address that situation. But I don't think pushing that out till late February is gonna be an issue. So I'm not concerned about that in terms of the 10th being a skip.
Okay. Well, let's skip and let's do the 8th, 16th, and then let's try to have let's try not to have a meeting for 2 weeks. Let's have a meeting the first week of March. You know what I'm saying? 8th, 16th, and then jump to the first week of March.
Danny, can we get an agenda item coming up? The Master Plan Implementation Committee is submitting to the Select Board an article to expand the numbers of members of the committee from 5 to 7. So I know it's not on the agenda, so I just wanted to throw it out that it might end up needing to be a Select Board and Planning Board sponsored article. So if you could put that on an agenda, I don't think it'll take a lot of time, but just thank you.
All right. Tim, can you help me remember? Maybe we could do that on the 8th or the 16th.
I just wrote a note to myself to confer with you tomorrow because my brain is soup right now. So
That's fine.
figure out all these dates and find the best time for it.
I just realized did we put down a time? Okay, you and I will talk tomorrow, Tim. Okay, does anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Rich Wheeler,
Yes.
Kathleen,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes.
Meredith,
Yes.
Denny Swenson, yes. Good
I've
night,
been on
everybody.
Zoom
Night,
for
everyone.
6 hours today. 6 hours of Zoom.
And I can go
Fun
have dinner
stuff.
now.
Nice.
Oh, man.
Good night.
I'm having
Bye.
cake. Good night.
Let them eat cake.